Hi guys,
Hello.
and welcome back to PJ Maybe. And this week we're looking at Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, the book. Yay!
Right,
So
just a minute. I'm going to get my copy. Now, this was first published in 1989, wasn't it?
yes, yep, that's right. I've been disclosure. I've been listening to it in audio. I've got the audibles, so I have. So
Mhm.
I did read it when it first came out. I must admit. I have got the books somewhere, but because of my DVD collection, my books are starting to be hidden in places. So trying to find any of my books is becoming impossible with the amount of DVDs I've got. I'm going to have to recategorize them or catalog them and number my shelves so I know where things are. It's that bad. Plus, I've got loads more. That's the one. I remember that one.
Mine's looking worse for wear.
I've got a few books like that. My Wheel of Times look like that. My first five Wheel of Time books look like that because I've got them in paperback. Everything else is hardback. Hi, Windology.
Hello,
Thanks.
Endology.
So, Infinity welcomes careful drivers. In effect, it is the. Would you say the first two or three seasons?
It's basically an alternative.
Would you say the first two or three
Right, it's
seasons? That's an
right.
echo. That was my fault. Sorry.
It's basically a retelling of the story, but it's not quite as it was on TV.
No,
Like,
I think they calmed it down a bit. It's a lot darker in places.
oh yeah, yeah,
There's more backstory to each of the characters as well, rather than just the one line of how they got there or things like that.
yeah.
It was interesting to see the changes they made for the TV show, I must admit.
Just to
Where they're
clarify, basically, it takes the plots of The End, Future Echoes, Crichton, Me Too, and Better Than Life.
yes, it does all those in the one book, and it's a more streamlined telling of the stories.
Mm.
Whereas obviously there's just an episode here and there that actually those things appear in. This is a more constructed dialogue, which makes it more interesting because they give you a lot more detail, obviously, about how the course of events that led
Yeah.
to things happening, which I found quite interesting. And if you've not read the book, I think it's definitely one people should be reading. And there's Darren joined us as well. Hi, Darren. Thanks for joining us.
The big change for me in the book is that basically in the TV show, so I seem to be getting an echo, don't I?
It might be me. Hold on. I specifically got headphones here just so I didn't want to wear my big headphones, so I decided to dig out a wee set of headphones. So if you're getting an echo, I'll assume it's me. So, and there. Okay. Still get the echo?
No, it's gone. It's gone. Good.
Aye, well,
Right.
I dug these out just so I didn't need to actually sit with big headphones on because I tend to shout, according to my wife, when I've got them.
Okay. In the TV episode, The End, the Lister's goal to get back to Earth only really starts after he comes out of stasis and he realizes that he's 3 million years away from Earth.
Yes.
In the book, he's actually trying to get back to Earth before he even joins Red Dwarf because basically what happens is he gets drunk on his birthday.
It does Monopoly pub crawl.
Yeah, Monopoly pub crawl. And he says they couldn't, like, towards the end, like, no one could play it properly and no one knew the rules. So he said, I'm going to go actually buy a Monopoly board. So he walks away from his friends. And then he just doesn't remember what happened because he gets in the taxi, he sees this advert for interstellar travel, he blacks out, and he wakes up on Mimas.
Yeah.
And he's got I think he ends up with some bag lady's passport.
Yes, it does. It's basically he's got her was it Susan something or other thing? But yes, he ends up with a woman's passport.
It's Emily Parkinhurst or just something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't refer back to it because I would need to actually listen to the audio.
So basically, the reason he joins Red Dwarf even is because he's
wanting to get back home.
Yeah, he's stranded on was it Mimas?
It is. Was Mimas not the first? Because it's the only two they mention is Mimas and Titan. So I think it's Mimas he starts off in.
Yeah, and Mimas is this horrible kind of it's basically just one of the roughest colonies in the solar system.
Yes,
and so he's trying to basically make enough. He's basically having to kind of scrum for taxis and basically use the taxi fare to try and get enough money together.
Yeah, and the taxi fare is even the taxis are quite fun as well.
Yeah.
They're hoppers rather than flyers or drivers. They're hoppers, and he steals one, which has got rickety suspension. And oh look, Rocks! Hi and welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, look, Rocks.
I love that name. Oh look, Rocks.
Can I call you Rocky as a shorthand?
Yeah. But I like that, and it also introduces you to Rimmer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a case of, well, in the book, obviously on the TV show, the two of them are working together. That's where it starts. You don't mention about how they met each other and stuff like that. He was just in charge of Lister.
Yeah.
Accordingly, he was only in charge of Lister. Whereas the book has he's in charge of Z Shift. So there is a number of them, Peterson as well, and a few others. And Z Shift is the worst shift, even though he's trying to make it the best shift. But they meet first where Rimmer's going to a robot brothel.
Yes.
In disguise.
Yeah.
So that even that part was a bit darker because
I think what was good was the fact that even then you could see there was a class divide there, because Lister was kind of just the menial kind of driver, and Rimmer treats him like absolute crap because he thinks he's just this. He said, "You're not paid to think, you're paid to drive," and he's got this. Like, I love this bit where he reminisces on it. It's like, how could Lister think I did this? True, I do it, but it's not like me.
Yeah, yes, that's right. He goes when he's later on when he dies, he's reminiscing about the fact that he's going to cast it up to him, and it's just not like him to do it, even though he did do it.
Yeah,
and even though he said and when he says we've met before. No, we haven't. I've never been to that brothel.
Yeah.
It basically tells him where he never met him. Exactly where he never met him.
Right. I've got a quote about the hoppers, by the way. In London, people parked wherever it was possible. In Paris, people parked even where it wasn't possible. On Mimas, people parked on top of the people who parked where it wasn't possible.
Yeah, and the way he actually got his hopper taxi was he would wait at night.
Yeah,
and when all the taxi drivers parked up and huddled together, and he would steal the one at the end and go to the most disreputable areas in Mimas where taxi drivers or police wouldn't go, and that's where he got his fares.
Mm-hmm.
But even at the beginning, it shows you it's dark because there's drug use in it. There is brothels. There's a murder, and that's only in the first part. That's only just introducing Lister to you, because there's the part where he's sitting in the taxi waiting for Rimmer to come out of the brothel, and the two pimps have a knife fight. One gets his ears cut off, and then he gets stabbed.
Yeah,
and that's just the introduction. You know what I mean? It's.
Yeah, it does feel like a kind of planet of just human filth, doesn't it?
Yes, it definitely does.
So you can really relate with Lister's desire to just get the hell out of there.
And there's another one, fit to be read.
Right.
Would
Yes,
you call this a must-read science fiction?
I would, but I'd recommend reading both the first two books.
Yes, this is. If you like Red Dwarf, it expands on the Red Dwarf program quite extensively. It gives a more detailed backstory to each and every character. Even Holly, it gives a better backstory rather than just Holly was there. And the next book as well, which is Better Than Life,
Yeah,
continues the story.
Yeah.
So this one takes you up to Better Than Life. So Better Than Life, it starts in this one, and then Better Than Life, the book, continues the story onwards.
To be read says, I have never seen the show though. It doesn't matter if you read the book; it explains everything. It's like you get the you basically get the feel of the characters.
Yes, it does. What the TV show does differently is it's not as it's humorous. So I would class it as dark humor. A lot of it. So the humor in the TV show is a lot lighter, and it's cut into more episodic episodes. So whereas in the book it has a good narration going forward, each individual thing leads on from the last part, and there is the continuity throughout the whole book. Whereas in the TV show, there's bits here and there. They're not necessarily.
Yeah, I think like Red Dwarf, the TV show, it just about teeters on the edge of being. It's kind of post-Watershed, but it's also kind of still a bit. You can watch it mostly as a family. The books are not necessarily family reading. They're not.
Yes,
they're kind of
that's
a bit
true.
More,
like, for instance, the brothel. We'll give you the example of the brothel. Rimmer goes into the brothel. He pretends he's going for a authentic Mimas delicacies. Yes, and when he's sure nobody's looking, he crosses the road and goes into the brothel, the robot brothel, where there's a man there, and the lady's asking him his selection, and he's saying, "I'll have the head from her, the right leg from her, the buttocks from her, the breast from her," and then they start taking her apart and putting them together to the man's delight, and where he seems very delighted. So when Lister goes in to pick up Rimmer, the woman says, "Can I help you? Do you want a custom-made one or off the peg?" And he says, "No, I'm not looking for a woman." This is okay, no problem. We've got some lovely boy bots. And he says, "No, it's a bit embarrassing." This is no problem. And then she calls, and a load of sheep come out. Bah, bah.
Electronic sheep,
Yes, electronic sheep, which flutter their eyes at him. So you can see where it was going from that, and obviously he has to explain why he's there. But the first part of it, there you go, as a brothel where they're taking the ladies apart and building them to the specification of the clients. And then obviously they've got the male ones there, and for the more extreme, it's the sheep.
Yeah. There's a bit of foreshadowing here, though, because you actually because there's this couple we meet, because one of them's this bliss freak, and he's basically the reason why Lister gets mugged.
Yes, that's the drugs part. They talk about there's two different types of drugs in it. One of them's the electronic drug, which is Better Than Life, and the other one is bliss. And the guy that mugs him is a bliss head.
Yeah, but like the Better Than Life thing is foreshadowing, because later that's what happens.
It is, because it basically explains all about bliss and Better Than Life, and how people who go into Better Than Life usually end up dead because their body wastes away because they don't realise they're in Better Than Life. But because the bliss head, did they call it a bliss fiend or a bliss head?
Bliss freak.
Bliss freak. Bliss is a drug that, even if you look at it, you get addicted, which makes drugs bust very problematic. But the fact is, when you're on bliss, you think you're God. Not only imagine it, you truly believe it. So he gets mugged by a bliss freak for money. And the bliss freak, even the way he mugs him, is funny.
Yeah.
I've got something in my pocket that will hurt you. No, you don't. So he took out his fist and hit him with it.
Yeah.
It's just that type of thing. The fact is, it explains in how bad the drugs are. It explains the drugs in a bit more detail than you would ever get in any TV family show. And they don't mention Bliss at all in the TV show.
I think what was I going to say now? The so basically, the point is though that he wants to get off this moon, and basically, from talking to Rimmer, like he doesn't like Rimmer from the start because he's obviously this.
Yes.
Not only is he kind of into kind of robot droids, but he's also a snob.
Yes.
And so but be good to get the idea from him that, you know what, if I sign up for the Space Corps, then I can get I can go on one of the mining ships. They'll do that tour of duty, and eventually they'll get back to Earth, and that'll be my way. I finally get home. But what he doesn't reckon on is the fact that they've got it's a 4.5 year
mission. 4.5, 5 year mission.
4.5 years because they've got to actually go to, was it Neptune or Uranus where they have to pick up the
they have to go to Titan to pick up the ore.
Right.
Which is the moon of Neptune.
Oh yeah.
Titan's one of the moons of Neptune.
Yeah.
So they have to go to Titan. Which I must admit, it also expands on the TV show of the cat. And it gives you a bit more detail than just the cat being there.
Yeah.
And it also expands on the cat. I like the fact that it gives a lot more detail. For the ones who haven't watched the TV show, like Fit to Be Read, it's really good because it gives you a lot more detail. With the guys like myself as well, the TV show, if you're more concentrated on the TV show, you miss out a lot. They just introduce the characters in small ways, and then the characters are there. The book gives you a lot of backstory on how the characters got there to start off with, and it is really good because if you've watched the TV show, it's good for that because you know the characters. This just gives you a lot more detail. And if you haven't seen the TV show and you fancy seeing the TV show afterwards, you already start with all that information, so it's easier to get into. I think if you do the books first and then go into the TV show, it's a better experience because you already have the knowledge of the characters. Yes, some of the situations that are going to pop up you're going to recognise from the book, and they're cut down, but you also know how they got there. Whereas in the book, they just turn up and then it's the story from there on. So I think the book is good for the start, from the start, the build-up of, because we only ever knew Rimmer and Lister from the very first episode and end, where they're just dislike each other and being annoying to each other. Well, I suppose Rimmer was being annoying to Lister. He was just being an officious twat, whereas Lister was being annoying deliberately.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, it introduces Lister, tells you why he got there, why he gets onto the Red Dwarf, and even when he's signing up, and the guy asks him, "Why do you want to join the Jupiter Mining Corps?" He gives the Star Trek speech. I want to boldly go where no man has gone before.
And like the interviewer just writes in the comments, possible attitude problem.
Yes. Which I thought was quite good because they make a couple of references like that, but I thought that was quite good because if you didn't have a reason, you just wanted to get to Earth and then jump ship once you're back on Earth.
Yeah.
It's a perfect thing to do because you would think of, what could I say in a situation like that? And taking something from the TV, I thought was just perfect. Yes, it was it was TV from hundreds of years ago. I think it's 2245. This is set.
I think so. Yeah, because something like that.
Aye.
Actually, just a minute. I'm going to check because he does actually give his birth date and let's see, Petrovich.
something 55. That's what it is. 2255. He's born, and he's put down as 1st of October 22 or 14th of October 2255. So he's meant to be 24. So it'd be 79, 2279. If my calculations are correct.
Yeah.
So not that I pick these things up, but fit to be read, yes, I would definitely read it. And hi, Darius Munchausen, thanks for joining as well. And just before we go on, remember and subscribe if you've not. Try to get those subscribers up to 100.
Indeed.
That's my advertisement done. Right, back to the book. But what did you think of the start of the book? Because obviously we've gone through the whole 13 seasons of Red Dwarf up to this point. So anybody that's followed along with us knows the TV show, because they would have done this, they would have watched it just prior to, or else they would have at least heard us all talking about the 13 seasons. This takes us right back to the very beginning again, but actually takes us further back than the very first episode of Red Dwarf.
Indeed.
So what was your thoughts of it?
I mean, it was. I think they started it well with because the first chapter is actually it's divided into parts, and the first part is called "Your Own Death and How to Cope with It," and it actually introduced us to a different hologram than Rimmer, but he's on Red Dwarf.
That wasn't even the hologram that was introduced at the beginning of Red Dwarf. I think the first hologram we see isn't mentioned in Red Dwarf. The second hologram we see an aspect of him is in Red Dwarf.
Yeah, we see. Yeah. The first hologram we see in the end was George McIntyre, and he's basically because Captain Hollister introduces him and says, "Look, even though just treat him like any other member of the crew and try not to run through him, even if you're in a hurry." Kind of thing. But in this, we see his predecessor, who's trying to kind of fill in forms. It's like the first line. The first line of the book is describe using diagrams where appropriate the exact circumstances leading to your death.
Yes, and he didn't like the idea. He had to actually send in his birth certificate to be invalidated. No. And he thought being dead, he shouldn't have to actually fill in forms. Being dead should mean you shouldn't need to do that. And yes, he had told his wife, if I ever die, I want you to go on and find something new. But I just didn't want to be around to see it.
Yes.
So it basically gives you an in-depth characterization of holograms. So it introduces them right at the beginning. So
it's like he just remembers what he said to his wife. He says, if anything happens to me, I don't want you to sit around mourning. Meet someone new, terrific, and start a new life without me. And then he looks back and thinks, what a stupid, fat, dumb thing to say. The kind of stupid, fat, dumb thing only living people would ever dream of saying.
Yeah, and even the fact that he's, because of that, and he's just already, he's been dead, what, is it a couple of weeks? And he's not even finished filling in the forms, and he's already got his wife sleeping with the Zero G team.
Yeah, he did that.
He's got a list of men using the condoms that he had bought, standing outside his wife's bedroom door because his head wouldn't go any further, wouldn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of male neuroses in these books. The guy just doesn't trust his wife at all.
I know. So, which is, you think about it, it shows that the way they wrote it, somebody's actually sat there and thought, what's the type of things you would say, and what would you regret if it happened? And they've written it in such a way that you're sitting there imagining, you can imagine, I know if I die, I want you to be happy, I want you to go on and meet somebody new. You die, then you come back, and they've done that. How would you feel, even in my bed?
Well, it's interesting because it does actually say that no one really thinks about what it's like to die, because this is like he's died and he's having to see the counselor, the ship's psychiatrist, explain all these concepts of existence and things that he's never considered before, things he doesn't get, and he's like, he doesn't, it's just, it's just this kind of, you can tell there's a complete divide there of because he just does not, like he's saying, like these psychiatrists do nothing for you, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I thought it was quite a good way to introduce the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Although these characters are obviously just there to set the premise for later on, so you don't need to do it with Rimmer. It's just to give you the idea of the type of things that could happen or would happen, because obviously with Rimmer it wouldn't happen for obvious reasons. You get
I mean, these things come out organically, don't they? Like, you spend, this is kind of, he's come to know the crew, like he's like, there's a long voyage, you've got to get to know people. So he gets to know Peterson, he gets to know Peterson's mad idea about his house on was it on Uranus, where basically he has to wear a spacesuit in his own house.
He bought it for it's going dirt cheap because there's no breathable atmosphere, and the only significant thing about the moon is it rotates counter to the planet is actually circling, so that's the only thing good about it. And he's trying to get Lister to buy the one next door because there's 2 million square miles going next door to him.
And it's the other thing is but the thing with Rimmer is that basically as we spend time with him, it's like things come out about how he tries to kind of pass his astronavigation, and he just spends most of the revision time building a timetable. And it's like, it's kind of poignant because it's like his timetables themselves are actually really meticulously crafted, and it's like if he's being scud on that, he would succeed, but like he ends up with no time to cram the.
Yeah, he spends the first, was it 7 weeks of his 2-month revision timetable building the revision timetable.
Yeah.
Color coding it, making it, and then he has to cram 2 months worth into 7 days. So because of that, what he does is he knows he's not going to get a lot of sleep, so he spends 2 days in bed sleeping, which means he's got 5 days to do it in. And then because he knows he's going to be a bit cranky, he has to get a lot of coffee to keep him going, which means he's going to go to the toilet all the time. Then he starts lagging, so he takes drugs to get him over it, uppers to keep him awake, and then so he's basically, in effect, he spends that much time preparing, even when he knows he's only got a short time to prepare. He re-prepares everything to the point where it fails him something drastically.
Do you think maybe he's doing this deliberately because he doesn't want to do the revision itself? Because the thing is, if you think about it, like if he failed the first time because he spent so long building that timetable, it would make sense that the next time he just, well, look, if it's the next year, then the timetable is still valid. So he can use last year's timetable, but he doesn't. He just.
Well, even you think about it as well, with the part just prior to the accident, he actually does it properly, where he didn't spend 7 weeks of his 2 months revision. No. He basically spent, he got it done in a day, and he's been following it, doing his 4-hour studying, even having breaks so he doesn't get overworked, and because that's the proper way to do it. But he also made a mistake in one of the dates, and he's doubled up, so he's missed his exam by a day. And even then, he seems to go on about cramming all these extra days into this one day, even though he's got minus 37 minutes to do. And the only way he could succeed in doing it is speak to Doctor Who. The only way he could do it is if he was Doctor Who. That's the word they used, if he was Doctor Who. Obviously, that was during the Tom Baker era. Because it was called Doctor. It used to advertise it as Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker, or Tom Baker as Doctor Who, whereas later on it was the Doctor. So you can tell roughly when it was actually written during the aspect of the show, because he had to be Doctor Who rather than the Doctor. So just a wee side note that. But yeah, it's the fact is, even when he does it properly, he messes up somehow.
Yeah.
It's almost like a case of that I need to do it properly this time, but he's doing it so well, and he's actually sticking to it, that he's actually added in extra days that he's missed the time for the exam, and he's already a half an hour late. Instead of going straight there and filling and starting, he goes back to his room, takes drugs, memory drugs. Then he actually realizes he spent so much time doing that he has to cheat, and then he spends the next hour writing all over his body.
Yeah.
Then he goes into the exam with half an hour left, and then he's freaking out about the guy obviously knows he's cheating.
Do you know my favorite?
He sweats.
Do you know the bit really I loved in that scene was when his heart's thumping so much that he says that he half expected the guy behind him to turn around and go, "Excuse me, do you mind keeping your heart down? I'm trying to concentrate."
Yeah. And whereas in the TV show, you just see the bit where he's cheating, and he basically pulls up his sleeve, and his hands full ink, and he just slaps it. That's the one it does in that, but it actually gives you a reason why he's got to that point, rather than just them talking about, he's failed it 9 times, or he constantly does this. Whereas in the book, he doesn't constantly faint, right, I am a fish, and then faint. He's done it twice, and the passed out of the 9 times. So 7 times he's failed it. He's got an F. Twice he's got an X.
Yeah.
That's a result. So it basically expands it like that. And hi, Jim. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Jim.
So I thought it was quite good because it gave you a lot more details. And I definitely like the extra details of the backstories of the characters, because when you've seen the TV show, it makes a bit more sense. Obviously, we always say that Red Dwarf, the TV show, canon doesn't really matter, because they do change it, and they just basically give you we did this and we've done that. So they don't mind about the canon, whereas this has got a good structure through it, which makes a lot more sense once you've read it, what happens when you see it appearing on the TV. 2 important details that we get in this. One is we actually have the first encounter with Red Dwarf. We actually see the scene where Lister's on the shuttle, and he actually first sees the ship. And there's a bit more detail about how the ship's designed, how it was built in space. Yep.
And it was designed to kind of run forever. It's designed to never land, and so basically, it's like it's not just. It's basically, that's our introduction to Red Dwarf, is just how Lister sees it through this document, this giant, and
the description with Peterson as well, because Peterson's drunk.
Yeah,
he says talking about it.
He's like, "How big is it?" It's like, it could eat Copenhagen and some other country for afters.
Yeah, so it is a lot bigger. Yeah, on the TV show, it's big, but you don't realise how big it is until the book describes it.
Yeah.
Even the bit about the cats later on, you realise how big it is. Whereas when you're seeing it, yes, there's a meteor or an asteroid with a ship built round it. It doesn't give the same type of scale, whereas the book describes it in so much detail that you realise it's big. Like, for instance, on the TV show, how many levels did they need to go down? 157 levels or something to the cargo decks.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's something like 6,000 levels they have to go down. So you can see the difference in it. So the journey from up and down the lifts can take hours just to get from one floor to another. Well,
they say it's like the structure of the ship is like, it almost looks like you can see the several cities constructed on it.
Yeah.
The other big difference is we see a lot more, like in this version, Kochanski and Lister actually date, didn't they? And they dated.
Yes, they do it date, and Kachansky's a nicer person on the TV show, rather than being slightly more selfish in the book.
Oh, you think?
Oh, aye. Well, the thing is, remember, on the TV show, you only know about them dating as he's chatting her up and he's going on about how they dated and how they thought it would work out and he'd get her back. Whereas in that, it was just a rebound because she was more interested in the other guy, and as soon as the other guy came back, he got dumped.
Yeah.
So it was more about, well, I've got somebody better than you, so I'm going back to them. Even though they dumped me because they want to go with someone, I'm so much in love with him. You don't matter as much. That's why I thought it was a bit more. She was a bit more selfish or selfish. Aye, selfish in it because she got dumped. The rebound picks him up, and as soon as the guy comes back, even after she got dumped, she dumps Lister and goes straight back to him.
Yeah.
And try to give the justification. Oh, I wish there was two of me so I could love you both. It's almost a case of really. So maybe I'm just an old cynic. The fact is, if somebody dumps you just to go with somebody else, would you take them back? No, but it's that aspect is you would dump somebody else who you're having a relationship and you seem to be getting on really well because somebody said, okay, I'll take you back. Dumped out the way. So that's what I'm saying. I think whereas in the show, they don't do that. It's more of a case of they had a relationship, it just ended and he'll get her back. And it's just one of those things that just came to an end and stuff. Whereas they don't go too much detail in what happened. It's just a case of things that he talks about.
But it's like it is kind of for that brief period. It is an idyllic romance. I mean, there's a bit where they watch Frank Capra's "It's a Wonderful Life" together, and he tells her the story of what happened when his dad died, and the business of
the fish down the U-bend. But he basically thought they asked where they'd go, and he says basically same place where your goldfish goes, and he says for months he thought his dad had been flushed down the U-bend, so he would sit with his head down the toilet pan reading the sports results to him, and he'd get to take to a psychiatrist because of it. But it gives you a lot more detail of their relationship. But the fact that she just basically ends it because her old boyfriend decided to come back to her, that to me, it gives it her a bit more selfishness. Whereas in the TV show, it's not too much details given. So there's the detail as in, oh, we had a relationship, but I'll get her back, and that's what I've got a plan. Whereas in this, it just gives that wee bit. Yes, he's obviously still head over heels, so he's still in his head. It's going to turn out to be good. It changes the relationship, I think.
Yeah, it's like I do think. Do you feel like in this, you get a lot more sense of the who the crew were? Like that, it feels like a much more populated ship, and as such, when the disaster happens, like it's a lot more tragic because like these are. Would you say?
Yeah.
I mean, the big tragedy for me is, of course, the Rimmer in this version, Rimmer so nearly survives because he
was actually heading to a stasis booth just to actually try and gain some time back, and he just spends that much time trying silly things like parting his hair in the other way, and that's when he gets going.
And they describe
selfishness and being pedantic is actually which doomed him.
And he actually describe how the accident happened and just the mishaps that caused it to happen.
Yes, it did. But did you not notice Rimmer didn't get the blame for it?
No, I didn't. No, he was.
No, he was just caught up in it. He didn't cause it.
No, yeah.
So it makes it a bit easier, and also it explains Caspaccio soup in a bit more detail. And the fact is, he didn't say it. It just. That was the last thing that goes through his head. So obviously in the TV show, they had to do it visually by saying it. But I think it actually is more poignant because it gives details as it's happening, and he's just thinking it. Even it explains why he's thinking it. of all the things that's happened in his life didn't pass before his eyes. The only thing that actually popped into his head was gazpacho soup.
Mm-hmm.
Because he didn't have enough time to actually realise for his life to pass in front of his eyes. Obviously, the TV show, they say gazpacho soup, but so I'm sorry I got distracted. You know me with I'm reading the chat as well. That's why I keep on saying I don't read the chat, because I'm dead easy to distract. So you sparkle. Oh! I'm basically one of those. I've got one track mind, and that keeps on jumping the track. So I do apologise. Sorry, people. But yeah, I think it was a better introduction to the accident as well. And it becomes more poignant when you realise that he nearly survived.
And it's like that completes the chapter, and like that completes part one, and part one was your own death and how to cope with it. It ends with Rimmer dying.
Yes.
But
so it basically it gives you the introduction to holograms, gives you the introduction to the holograms initially, and how somebody might not like it and what they try and do to get away from it. So the first guy kills himself again.
Yeah.
And the only reason he gets brought back, because obviously you can't kill yourself, you're a hologram. And the only reason he gets switched off is because somebody more important dies. Which was a suicide.
Well, no, it was no. Saunders was the one who died. He died in an accident. I think some beam landed on his head or something when he was mining.
Yes, that was the first guy.
So and then when he was brought back, he was like, "I wanted it to end." And then, as luck would have it, then George McIntyre is someone who kills himself because he had pet problems.
I'm thinking that he wanted to end. He was constantly moaning. I've just got those two bits in my head. Just went flick, as in he tried to end it, even though he was a hologram. Tried to end it. That's so. Those two skipped the track. But yes, he commits suicide, and because he's a more important crewman, and they can only sustain one. See, the thing is, explaining why they can only sustain one crewman. Parts of it makes sense, but in the TV show, it makes those parts make less sense.
Well, no, but they're different. They're both different, though. They're both different kind of canons, aren't they?
Yes, but it's just because of things like that, like Me Squared.
Yeah.
Wouldn't work because of it. But then again, Me Squared would work because a ship that holds that number of people and that size of ship, it uses 40% of its power generation and its runtime to do it, but it needs all the runtime to do everything else. If there is nothing else it needs to do except keep the engines going and electricity on, then it could generate two holograms, because taking 80% of its runtime and the extra power generation to needs. So it works that way, but when you've got a smaller ship, like for instance the Me Squared, it was the Nova 5 generator they used.
That's later.
Yeah, and that doesn't make a lot more sense that way, because it's a smaller ship. So how would they have the same power outage as Red Dwarf? Just wee bits like that.
It's a more advanced ship, though, isn't it? So it was made several centuries after Red Dwarf, so it would probably have more advanced technology to be able to do that with to less, half the runtime kind of thing.
Yeah, because they even mention the fact is only people out with these big ships that have a hologram is the rich people, because they can actually afford to run that amount of computer power and the energy needed to sustain a hologram.
Yeah. So shall we move on to part two of the because part two is basically when Lister is revived.
Yes. The reason why he gets put in is more interesting as well.
Yeah.
So the fact is that the reason he gets put in makes it a bit easier. Thanks, Fit to be read. Much appreciated for joining us. He had to run. So he obviously wanted off the ship.
Yeah, well, he wanted to.
He wanted to get to Earth. That was all he cared about. And then he realised he's got a 4.5-year trip,
Mm-hmm.
and he had to find a way of getting off or getting there. And he came up with a doozy of a plan.
Yeah.
Which explains more detail about the cat as well, because Frankenstein in the show, he's just got the cat, and where did he get the cat? He found it in Titan, so he smuggled it aboard because he thought Chrissy would like it. In the book, he was very meticulous. So in the TV show, he's a bit dumber about that. Yeah. In the book, he's a lot more clever because he didn't find a stray cat just it was something. He went and hunted for one, made sure it had all its vaccinations, made sure it was really fit, made sure it didn't have any disease, got it all scanned, checked out, everything. Paid a lot of money to get it. Then he smuggled it on board. And then he implies that it was found and it had breathing difficulties. Its hair was all falling out.
Yeah.
And even the fact is, taking the pictures, whereas in the TV show, he gets caught because he was dumb enough to actually take pictures and get them developed. Whereas in here, he thought somebody would have detected it somehow. Nobody did, so he had to take the pictures and get them developed so he could get caught. Because
you know that reminds me of a bit. It reminds me a little bit of the Goonies, because like the behind the scenes of the Goonies was apparently when they started that there was the three comedians on BBC. Apparently, Mary Whitehouse wrote an article saying how good it was to have good wholesome TV on, like the Goonies, for a change. And what was his name?
Tim Brooke Taylor, Bill Oddie, and Graham Garden.
Because Bill Oddie was kind of telling the stories like we read that, we're like, no, we're not a clean show. We she's got it completely wrong. And so they said, you know what, we've got to try and get a complaint from her. We've got to try and convince her it's a naughty show. So they tried everything. They tried.
I think it was the Ecky Thump episode. It was that was
the thing. Like they did like a scene with S&M kind of people whipping each other on the beach, and that didn't get a complaint. And then finally they did an episode where one of them has to put these underpants on, and he had this carrot on the front, and that got the complaint. And it was like, yes, we finally got a complaint from her.
But yeah, it's the goodies are always good.
Yeah.
But the fact is, the way it makes him a lot smarter, because he's not as dumb as the TV show portrays him. But he only got caught because he took the pictures and he got them developed in the lab. He deliberately takes the pictures and gets them developed. And he deliberately stores the cat in the ducks because that way nobody will be able to find it, because he doesn't want anything to happen to the cat. He doesn't want anything to happen to anybody, but he definitely doesn't want anything to happen to the cat.
Yeah.
So it's a lot smarter, which I think is actually better because of that. Because it didn't make him just this dumb guy who's just he's the lowest on the ship.
Yeah.
Even though he was quite happy to be the lowest because he was a technician. He kept going on about when he was when he says, you're going to be a third technician, the lowest, and he was giving it that, yeah, I'm a technician, yeah. And the guy didn't want to actually tell him that the third grade technician, third grade, got the jobs that the robots did, the scutters didn't like. So basically, they had a better union, as they said it in the TV show. But here it was a case of it was even too menial for the expensive scutters to do.
Yeah.
So, which I thought was quite good because, yes, he's never done anything. So they sort of hit on that in the show with talking about he giving up his career because he didn't want to be tied down because he was
he's very anti-aspirational, Lister, isn't he? He's kind of just like, I don't believe in standards. I am fine at the bottom. It's where I'm comfortable. I don't,
Yeah. And this one, it gives him a bit more understanding of his character.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought it was quite good for that because it made him Because everybody in the TV show kept going, like the captain, Hollister would have him and say, you're more intelligent, you applied yourself, you could have been something. Whereas here, it's not just said, it's shown, because he does. When he's got a plan, he works his way around to get that plan through.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite good, because it's a case of it's showed, not told. Yes, in a book it's obviously told, but you know what I mean? It basically explains it rather than somebody just saying, you're intelligent, you could do a lot more for yourself. Well, everything he's done up until this point doesn't show you that. The fact that he took a picture of a cat, the fact that he brought a cat on when he was told not to, the fact that pictures,
I think
it shows him as dumb, whereas here it shows him as less dumb because he does them deliberately.
Well, I mean,
that.
I think even the TV show, you could say he had brains, but he wasn't using them.
Yeah, well, I think it more implied he had the brains, but he wasn't using them. Yeah. But this one, it shows them a lot. I think it's a lot clearer. Only for the simple fact is the way he does it. It is a lot smarter, I think, because it explains that he's not dumb by taking his picture and he got caught. Oh dear. He deliberately does it because he wants to get caught. The fact is, he brought the cat on and he didn't realise it. Oh dear. It was a case of he deliberately brought the cat on, made sure all things that might happen, he got it all tested for everything he could. So it was interesting to see that aspect of the Lister character, because it doesn't just imply he's more intelligent, it shows he's more intelligent. He just doesn't want to actually do anything with him. He's a lazy intelligence. Whereas in the book, in the TV show, I think it's more of a implied intelligence, because I can't remember anything in the show that actually, apart from when they built Crane later on, I think it showed he had that intelligence.
I think it's more like when it comes to like the show shows that when it comes to crunch time, his brains will come into effect. But when he's not presented with that, he's quite happy to be very slovenly and just let everything kind of just fall to pieces.
Yeah.
Whereas
I quite agree, but whereas in the book, he uses his brains.
Yeah.
He uses them very well. Here's the captain actually on with us. Now, Captain, I hope your internet doesn't crash.
Hi, Captain.
I watched a couple of his streams and it was dead. It was dead good because there was silence and there was no pictures. It was funny. I just hope it doesn't happen to me again. It happened to me once. Remember?
Yeah, I
got kicked off my own stream, but the captain, it happened to him. I was watching and it twice. I watched 2 of his different streams and I get kicked off, which is a pain in the butt. Yeah. I do agree because it's happened to me once. But we don't have the outmoded New Zealand grid to actually complicate ours. We've got the outmoded Scottish grid up here.
So, shall we talk about the bit where Lister's revived?
Yes.
And it's 3 million years on. And now in the TV show, it was never quite clear why Red Dwarf had been adrift for 3 million years. Why it had kind of gone that far away from Earth. Why? And it was made clear. Holly was like, look, I've got to get my first priority is safeguard the solar system. Red Dwarf is flooded with radiation. Keep it as far away from the solar system as possible.
See, it explains why it was 3 million years, but it doesn't explain why anything else, because it just explains that he didn't get revived because of the radiation level. Yeah. But as you said, they didn't explain why they were in 3 million years into deep space. Whereas the same again, gives it more context. And I thought those wee bits made this story more compelling because of that.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think that the Dead Dave scene isn't as funny.
No, but it's a darker kind of.
It is a darker, yes. They've still got all the aspects of the Dead Dave. Yes, he's dead. Yes, they're dead. And that's console operator you're eating and stuff like that. So there's all the bits there. But I think the TV show, because it's visual and they were cutting bits down, they made it a lot more fun but I don't think they could make it that type of fun because it had to be darker. So the notes are all there. They're just done with a more background in the back, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
A more eerie background.
I think the the bit when the book where you actually see Lister's breakdown, because he just starts he just starts going around the ship naked. He starts shouting at people on there. It's a lot more.
Yeah,
harrowing.
he's walking about
harrowing.
with he's walking about with bottles of whiskey, and the reason he's not taking his beer is because the amount of beer he would have to carry it was untenable. So he was drinking beer whiskey even though he hated it because he needed to get that drunk, and he just fell apart. Which the book, the TV show, never really covered anything about it. He just sort of accepted it from the get-go.
In the book, in the TV series, it was like it gradually sank in. Like it was only really, I suppose, around time side of the started to sink into him just how bleak his predicament was. Whereas in the book, it's like and it has to get that bleak because this is kind of the impetus for why Holly has to revive Rimmer.
Yes, because whereas in the show, Rimmer is brought back right at the beginning.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, because they couldn't have an episode or two just Lister on his own, falling, crashing. They had to obviously combine all that to make it a more fun story. Yeah. So they had to have Lister. And see, before we go any further, see the Audible. The person they got to read the Audible was perfect.
Oh,
Chris Barry.
Chris Barry, yeah.
He did all their voices, and yes, you could actually see. So when he did Holly, you could see Norman Lovett because his voice. You know what Chris is like. You've seen some of the outtakes when he's copying, even actually the ones on the show where he actually takes the mickey out of the characters by portraying them. He's that good. In the book, he's in the Audible book. He's that good.
I thought he was sometimes a bit too. Like sometimes I thought he made Lister and the cat and even Rimmer a bit too caricaturish because, like, the thing is, he's got his reading voice, and because he's like Rimmer, he seems to exaggerate Rimmer being Rimmer. So it's like
But so in Audible, I've seen a lot, and that's what they do, just because they're having to see. I listen to a lot of Terry Pratchett, so you. Nigel Planer, you get Tony Robinson, and you get a few others doing it, and they always, like when they're doing death, they always over exaggerate it, and the voice comes down, and that type of thing. So they always over emphasize characteristics, and I think it's to distinguish between them just reading the panel or the passage rather than putting the character into it. So yes, he does over characterize certain things in all of them, but I thought because I can't imagine anybody else just reading it and then trying to put their own spin on the characters. I think it's because he is a character. He did interpretations. He was an interpreter, or it's not an interpreter. What is it? Oh, a comic impersonator. That's the word I was looking for. Because he did that with Spitting Image. So he's obviously got that background. And I think if any of the other ones would have done it, I don't think it would have worked as well. Or if it was another impersonator doing it, I don't think it would have worked the same as well. But because he had his reading voice and then his characters' voices, yes, he exaggerated the characters because he wanted to bring those characters out. And because he does the Rimmer character, he had to over-exaggerate it to show the difference between him and his character he was portraying. So I think that for that, it definitely worked. But yes, he did. Sometimes they were a wee bit caricatures of themselves. So when he was doing his own character, he did a caricature. So,
and so when Rimmer comes back, it's like they instantly just don't like each other anymore because like Rimmer's kind of just really self-pitying about the fact he's died, and and Lister's kind of but in a way, even though Lister's annoyed by Rimmer, you can tell it's had that effect of kind of it's galvanized him a bit, because it's a bit of familiarity of how things were. That's just about. It's given him someone to it's given him an antagonist to say, look, I'm going to get one over on you. So it's given him a reason to pull together a bit more.
See, that's what I must admit. The book actually was very good at that, because if they had brought him back and then suddenly it was all back to normal and they were just having a wee slagging match at each other, you'd have thought, but because he had the breakdown and they brought him back and he was whiny and he was all self-centered and he was all that, you're sitting there thinking, yeah, it actually works really well, because he's more annoyed at him whining about dying than the fact that I'm the only person left alive and I'm on my own. But he's so whiny about it, it sort of distracts him to the point where he does bounce back, and then he realizes, even though I'm the only person, I've got it worse now because I'm not the only person. Because I've got to live with you for the next 50 years, I think he said at one point. I'm going into stasis, but what about me? It's, I don't want to live with you. I would rather eat my own vomit. I would rather eat somebody else's own vomit every hour on the hour, rather than just spend the time with you.
Yeah.
And it goes from there. Yeah. But I think that the breakdown was handled quite well, and the recovery was handled better.
Yeah.
I think if they'd done that on the TV show, it would have been a bit slapdash.
It would have been an episode. It would have to be an episode in itself, probably.
Yes, but I think it would have been a bit slapdash, because they wouldn't have made it as dark, and it had to be dark because somebody in that situation, they wake up so far in the future that everybody's dead.
Can I just make a point though? I think, like with the American remake, they tried to incorporate bits of the book, but only really the backstory bit. Well, there is the fact that in both versions, Lister is he ends up on Mimas from getting drunk on his birthday. But you think because the American version is supposed to do something different to the TV version, you'd think maybe they bring some of that into it.
Yeah,
just to be different.
That was another thing as well. The American did correct, because in the book, Hollister isn't a male.
No, that's true. Yeah,
she was a female captain.
Yeah, with the unfortunate surname of Kirk.
With a forced surname of Kirk, which I thought would have been. Yeah, I can understand why they didn't do it in called instead of Kirk something else. But I thought that would have been funny, especially in the American one, and made a thing with somebody making a joke. Just call her. Yes, Captain, or do something if you do it in a slight connotation, because her name's Kirk and she hates the fact that she's Captain Kirk. Yeah. I thought they would have been better in the American one. It would have distinguished it differently, because yes, they had the female captain instead of the male captain in the thing, but they stuck more to the book. And I think if they'd gone down, I think if the Americans made it a wee bit darker, less funny, which they tried to do, and it was just dire. Because the humour is so different. I think the Americans could have done the darker humour a bit better. And if they got more closely to that, it would have been funnier.
You know, the American version is not dark at all. It doesn't feel dark, even though
But I'm saying if they did go down that route, it would have been a lot funnier, because I think Americans can do darker humour a bit better. Whereas the British, the humour is self-deprecating humour. They're superb at that. Yeah. Whereas the American humour can be a bit darker, because I think they've got, I suppose, a more nihilistic humour. So they can do a bit darker. And I'm trying to think of anything in the UK, a dark comedy that was really good. There has been a few. There's no doubt about it. There has been a few. But I'm just trying to think. One off the top of my head.
Hitchhiker's Guide was pretty dark, wasn't it?
Well, there you go. There's one there. The Hitchhikers, which started as a radio play, and they didn't actually lighten it too much when they brought it onto the TV. It had a dark undertone to it, but it wasn't they didn't try and make it a ha funny dark. So they basically decided to keep it more dark than it was humorous, but which made it better, I think. Whereas if you look at the remake of The Hitchhikers, they tried to make it more funny, whereas it went in the opposite way. Whereas I think normally the Americans actually are very good at darker humour. But I think if they'd done a pilot based on the book, they would have done it or succeeded a lot more.
Well, the book feels like it's kind of... It feels like if it was going to be made, it would have to be made as a film rather than a TV story.
See, I actually think it would have worked better as a story, but not half-hour episodes. Actually, as a ongoing story, like they do with some of these soaps and stuff like that, or they have an actual story that doesn't just wrap up at the end of every episode.
You mean like
sorry?
What do you mean like? Do you mean like a mini series like V or something? Yeah,
like that. Yes, I think it would work better rather than just try to get everything in the one, or even a trilogy or whatever. Whereas an hour-long episode covering aspects of it, and then just at the same point. So, like, do the chapter 1 where they're introducing the Rimmer Lister, then do the Dead Dave episode 2 and his breakdown and how they had to bring him back. Then just they could do the introductions. Like, for instance, they could have the death at the end of episode 1. Then they could finding doing the alien. Dun, dun, dun. There's something coming too close as it's almost upon us. Dun, dun, dun. That type of thing. So they did the alien thing with the cat. So they could have stopped it there with the dun, 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 and stopped it there because you don't know what's happening. And then that, I think a mini series, whereas it's not episodic, but they could stop it at certain parts, which would lead into the next part. And I think a slightly darker humour would have worked a lot better.
Yeah.
America, if you're going to go for it, remember I said it first.
We should. What you just said kind of leads into the part where they find the remnant of the cat city, because
that was a lot better than just the cat.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
The fact is, because Holly has got access to the whole ship, so he detected a life form. It wasn't human. So because he'd unsealed it, and you're sitting there thinking, I would love to see that where they're going on the hunt down. There's the dong dong. So it's the alien part. So you don't know what they're coming up across. Obviously, if you'd read the book, if you'd seen the TV show, you know what's coming up. But if you're reading the book, you don't know what's coming, and then suddenly there's a city. Yeah,
even if you know the backstory, that's the bit where they find the city is fascinating itself, and it really gives you a sense of what it was actually like for those 3 million years on the ship when the cats were living there.
And even the fact that the backstory of the cats as well, how they got to that point, and then how they survived on a ship.
Yes.
Because it was so long that they were just hunting for rats and weevils and thingy, and that's how they survived. And then they were about to die because there's so many of them. It's the foxes and the rabbits. If there's too many foxes, the rabbits die out, and if the rabbits die out, the foxes die out because there's not a food source. So, and if there's no enough foxes, then the rabbits, which causes and it is a cycle. So sometimes if there's too many rabbits, it breeds a lot of foxes because there's a high supply of food. But as soon as there's so many foxes that it reduces the food supply, then all the foxes die out, and it's just a circle where they'll go up and down. Yeah, whereas the cats, because there's so many of them, they've obviously hunted it to the point of near extinction, and they find the food, which I think just the fact that he picked up the tin opener and opened something, I thought it was a wee bit too rushed, explaining how they thought about what this device was or whatever to
Well,
explain
no-
why he just went up and opened the tin.
Well, I mean, there's like how many thousands of cats? So I mean, it makes sense one of them would have the bright idea, maybe.
To try it.
And like but obviously by doing it, it's a blasphemy because the basically the tins of food are kind of treated as religious symbols. So they think if you take one of them down, you're committing a blasphemy.
Yeah, which I thought was quite good because it explains even the fact is when the Rimmer listeners going down the lifts and they're talking about for the last 10 miles, all that or these floors, 20 floors, and each of the floors is like 10, 20 miles long. There was crates of wood, metal. Yeah, I mean, so he explains how for 3 million years, obviously 3 million years, I think, even at that, the Cat Society could have survived and just used. They would have literally had to strip it bare.
Yeah.
And also the fact is, in the TV show, they built 2 arcs and left, whereas in this, they just took the shuttle pods.
Yes.
Makes it a bit more sensible. So, but I loved the backstory of the cats. It made it a lot more fun. And it explains the cat being the cat. Because you've seen it in the show. Everything else, every other cat had names. Anytime they come across a cat, even the old priest at the beginning had a name. Whereas the cat is just the cat. The priest called him Boy. He didn't have a name, but it explains why he didn't have a name because there's only 2 people survived, the cripple and the idiot. And then once he was born, he just didn't know about born or parents. He just saw, he knew there was 2 of them around for a while. And one of them must have been his mother. It must have been the one that actually kept slapping him every time he tried to have sex with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the fact is, so he was the center of the world. It was only him, so nobody gave him a name because it's that aspect of it. I thought was quite clever because it explains why he doesn't have a name. He's just the cat. Whereas you've got in the Promised Land, you've got Ronan, you've got Luna, I mean that type of thing. So all the cats had names, yet the cat is just the cat.
I think I read apparently that when they were juggling for ideas for continuing this as a book series, they were at one point considering doing a kind of a longer novel about the cats, and that never happened. But I think I suppose in a way the Promised Land was probably the closest we got to that.
It probably is, and I think it's shown because they introduced a brother. To me, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Because if it was his brother, even if he was introduced his brother, that means there was somebody else there, so he must know his name. And he didn't call him by name. None of them did.
No.
So that's weird. But I think the introduction, I would have loved to see a whole episode where they're finding the cat city.
Yeah.
And they're exploring it, and then they're hunting for the life sign. Even a wee half-hour episode would have the introduction to the cat rather than the cat just appearing and doing all those bits. Yes, that was funny in the TV show, but I think the cat city was probably a bit more entertaining. The idea of it. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, and Alien. But that was the third reference in the book to 3 different movies. So you've had Star Trek, Doctor Who, and Alien.
Well, like I said, it was well done because like you saw the evidence of a civilization, and then you then you got the backstory to explain it. So it was like you were already intrigued to know what the signs of what had been before, kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and it's definitely something I'm happy that the book expanded on. And we are aware that books can make things easier. They have got the time to explain things.
Yeah.
They could explain things in one page that a TV show couldn't do in an hour-long episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm aware of that, but I think even just a wee hint of that would have been fun.
Yes.
Rather than just an explanation about it.
So the next bit is the Future Echoes bit, isn't it?
Well...
Oh, is there something you wanted to say on before we got to
No,
that?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was the Future Echoes. I'm trying to think if there was something else I was going to say, because I know the cats. No, it was... if it has, it might pop in later on and I might go back to it, but Future Echoes was the next part where Holly realises that in his rush to get out of the solar system to take the radiation encased ship away from the human sphere, he accelerated out of the Earth and away from Earth. Yeah. And considering Red Dwarf only travels at 200, is it miles per second or miles per hour? Or no, 200,000 miles per hour. So not very fast at all. It's basically, it's dead slow. But because it's been accelerating for it's been accelerating all the time for 3 million years. It's about to...
It picks up fuel as it goes, doesn't it? Because the scoop basically sucks in basically background.
Yeah, and Holly completely forgot that he'd actually set it to accelerate. So it basically has been accelerating for 3 million years to the point it's about to actually do the impossible. Break the light barrier, which, according to science, is impossible because nothing can travel faster than light. Yeah. But accordingly, they're about to do it in 1.0 1.07 seconds, 0.37 seconds, and it's Holly's actually explaining all this and thinking about it in the 1.5 seconds before they actually break the light barrier. But it could have been months the way he's actually talking to himself. But because he's a supercomputer, he's basically everything's in his time frame. Like, for instance, when he's about to do it, he reads the Bible, the Quran, and every other religious book he can find, and books on astrophysics, and every single book. He even goes down to actually reading Agatha Christie at one point, Sherlock Holmes, anything at all and everything. So he's read everything, and this is in the 1.7 seconds. So yeah. I thought that was quite good, the way they played in it. But yeah, the time dilation was quite well done. And I think the TV show actually did it quite well as well, because they had everything that was here, apart from the walking part. But I think that was just a wee bit too much to ask for. Yeah. They did it in other episodes, talking about like with Crichton, with stepping into and out of a time zone where they were talking too slow and too quickly.
Yeah, basically, in the book, when they break the light bar, you actually see what it does physically to Lister. Yes. How it basically changes his state for a moment, to the point where he's kind of turns him into a liquid, and then he reforms back into his old self. But he's basically
he's got a quantum mass of 0 and a quantum mass of infinity at the same time. So yeah, but the fact that they actually all the things that happened in Future Echoes actually happened on the TV episode Future Echoes.
Yeah,
there wasn't any wee bits that they says, nah, that's no good. Because you think about it, how many other things could they have had? And thought, no, we need to actually make it tight for the TV show. They didn't. They obviously had it all there.
Sorry, just a minute. I'm going to have to close the window because we've got fireworks going on. Sorry. Entertain the chat while I'm...
no problem. Yeah, so within that, with the fireworks going off, obviously people are cheering us on, but when they hit the light barrier, the things like the old drummer, Lister sitting in the bed, the explosion that kills Lister, and the babies are all there in the book, but they're the only 3. They could have had a lot more in the book and cut it out to streamline it for the TV show, but obviously not. They just kept it to those 3 main things. They had bits and pieces about when they did cross the light barrier, things that happened to the bodies and how they perceived it and stuff like that. So it wasn't too bad. So, and I don't think they could have done that well on the TV show. So I can understand why they left that out. However, sorry.
I'm back. Sorry, you're going to say, just carry on.
No, I was just going to say, however, I think the bits they did cover in the TV show from the book were the 3 things that were in the book. They didn't trim it down. They didn't actually add anything extra in. And I think it worked quite well in the book and the TV show together. I think both of them worked quite well together.
The main thing the book does differently is it actually has Lister kind of reflect on his life, because it's like knowing he's going to die. He has that kind of he's like he basically his old he considers his whole life, and now he's basically just wasted his life away.
But they sort of did that as well. Remember, I've never read a book. Mm-hmm. They obviously added bits in, whereas in the book they actually says I've never read at all.
Well, in the TV series, he's got that impact of it, but basically he touches on it, but in the book he kind of reckons with it. If you know what I mean, he reckons with the fact he's going to die, and he's reckoning with the fact that
he doesn't want to, and he's told he has to, and he's going, right, I'm going to actually get there. I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think definitely the book handles all of it a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, guys, if you've got a chance, get a hold of the book, the Audible book or just the paper book. 2 of them as good as each other. I only need to listen to the Audible book because I'm getting too old and I can't sit with my glasses on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
With the book sort of going, it's terrible. So
I think in a way the books emphasize the cosmic element a bit more, don't they, than the TV show?
They do. Yeah. You feel when you're reading the book the time frame, how big space is. I know it sounds silly how big space is, but you think about it when you're in it, you're only seeing the room, the bunk room, most of it, and they talk about how big space is. We all know how big space is, but in the book there's a lot more explanation or expansion on it, and you just think, wow, yeah, it is. It's a long time and a long distances between things. Just things like turning around, having to, he says when they actually hit the light barrier and they're trying to turn around. In the TV show they talk about how it's brown. Even the only time you see a planet is when you're past it. So even with an IQ of 6,000, it's still brown trousers time. Whereas in this, he reckons he's passed through 7 planets and at least 2 suns.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but because they've been traveling at light speed, what does it do? They don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's that aspect of it I thought was quite good, because it gives you the distance and the time. It just expands it and makes you feel it a bit better. So it's not stuck to the bunk room, and it can actually expand a bit better on it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but eventually, because I think they also like it really. The book does a lot more to emphasize Red Dwarf as kind of a place of dwindling supplies. Like the survival situation on the ship is kind of more emphasized. Because like
it is, but I think that also why in the book they go down and they talk about the cats more, because there's cats that have been living there for 3 million years.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're going to actually completely empty it before they decide to leave. Even though the Holy War was changed, which I think the TV was slightly better about the Holy War than the book. The reason for the Holy War, I think it was better in the TV show than the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because one set thought it was cloister and the other set thought it was clister. Whereas in the TV show, it was one of them thought it was red hats, and the other one thought it was green hats. What's funnier? I think the hats was funnier, but I can understand the hats one a bit better because it's a case of it's a fundamental change, whereas the other one's just a pronunciation change.
Yeah.
It's you can understand where people say it's just the way I speak. It's just because they're so close to each other. I would have preferred if one of them maybe thought it was Cloister, and the other one maybe thought it was David. So basically it's the two parts of his name, but they've separated them. I would have preferred it was like that rather than two variations on Cloister Clister.
That would have been
better. It was a wee bit clumsier that way, whereas I think the way they did it in the TV show with the two colours of hats was funnier, but I think it would have been clever if they had Cloister and David, or because they knew it was David Lister later on, or they called him Davy Clister or Cloister. So if they had one of them said, oh, it's David or a David or some variation on it, and the other one was Cloister, so they've taken the two separate names as if they're two separate characters, whereas it's just the one. I thought it would have been funnier that way, or more clever, I suppose. But that's just me being a bit pedantic again.
Oh, Wendology's doing the Cloister song.
Yes. Yes, well, in the book, that's what the holy was about, the pronunciation of Cloister or Clister.
Yeah.
So I think Cloister was better in the song, whereas Clister would have been a wee bit different song. And yes, the background around the cats, you get a lot more background in the book. You definitely do.
Yeah.
And I think you would enjoy that about the cats. Even that part, that chapter on the cats was really interesting.
Yeah.
I thought that was really well done. So I do.
And then there's the because the bit where the Lister actually has to repair the drive, like it feels a lot. There's a lot more emphasis on like just how the drive room is is falling to bits, and like it just feels like a lot more dangerous, and it just feels like Lister's about to face the end here.
Yes, but see, when I was obviously I'm saying reading and listening, but see when I was going through the book, that was one of the wee things that I thought didn't quite gel for me, because the book has been a bit more dark.
Yeah.
Whereas he's obviously gloating on the fact that he's going to explode, split apart.
Yeah.
Whereas I would have seen it better that maybe Holly turns around and says, well, if he does die, at least we can switch you off. So he would have been more a case of, you can't do that, don't try and fix that. And it's him coming in to try and fix it because he's realizing that he needs to do it. He basically he can't be live in fear. Whereas Rimmer would have been the ones trying to convince him not to do things because he doesn't want him to die. Because if he dies, even though it'll be fun for him, he'll realize he gets switched off because there's no human there. There's no need for a hologram, so he gets switched off. I think if they'd done that way and actually had him being the one trying to tell him not to do it because he's not interested in his life, he's interested in his own. But it's just the way they've actually explained the things made a bit more dark and they had the twists and turns. The fact that it was him, it was having the philosophical talk about himself about not wanting to die and try to change it so it wouldn't die and stuff like that, and try to make sure the cat didn't lose his tooth. Whereas I think it would have been better in the book, just that slight twist where you realise if I die, you die as well, because you can't do it and try to stop him all the time. You can't do that. Just ignore it and stuff like that. Just to prolong his life a wee bit longer because he knows if he dies at any point.
Yeah. Actually, excuse me, I'm just enjoying a Kit Kat, funny enough.
Well, I've got a big box of bananas and shrimps. That's for me. I think they missed the trick with the cat. Would have loved a scene where he walks past an empty cardboard box and jumps in it. Yeah. In the the Cat City, there is effectively, it's all small apartments where it's in effect, it's just wee cat boxes where they all just go in and just curl up, and it's got a opening at the top, which implies it's almost like a wee cardboard box with a hole cut in it.
Yeah.
That's the way the description of the Cat City in their apartments. It was effectively he crawled in and there was an opening at the top, and there was only enough for two small people to lie down. And I thought, that's effectively a box with a hole cut in it. They've climbed in and there's a hole above. And then they talk about the cat actually going to sleep, and he crawls on top of the wardrobe and cooties up in this wee teeny spot, like a cat would do. But I think, they missed a couple of tricks with cats.
Oh, hello, Enigmatic Joker. Welcome to the stream.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for joining us.
Yep.
But the cats went. I would definitely, if you can't get a hold of the whole thing, try and get a hold of the chapter with the cats. That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one. Especially you'll enjoy it, especially if you like the cats. But the whole book, I would definitely get a hold of that book and read it. But the time slides part. So obviously it starts with. It doesn't start with Lister dying. It starts with the conversation. Doesn't it start with the conversation where which they did very well in the TV show. I think it worked well in the book, but it worked even better visually, seeing the two of them playing that speech.
Yeah.
Whereas it's the same speech twice. They also did the cat tooth, and they hit everything. It was actually in the time slides in the TV show as well. But I think the TV show did the bit where they were having the chat out of sync with each other very, very well. Very well done, so it was. But the book, they started off with that, and then obviously they bump into the cat and see the cat. And that's when even Lister agrees that something's quite off. Then there's the explosion, and he gets told that he's going to die, and the philosophical argument about, well, it's going to happen or not, well, try to deny it, and then they find out that they bump into the old Lister.
I'm surprised actually we didn't actually in the book get Rimmer actually seeing Lister blow up. In the TV show we don't actually see it. We just Lister arrives on the scene and Rimmer describes what he saw.
Yeah.
Whereas and in the book it's the same thing. You'd think maybe in the book they would actually show what they couldn't show on TV.
Yes, but he described it a bit more detail.
Yeah.
With his arms getting ripped off and the wee squidgy bit getting flown across and stuff like that.
Like a boomerang, yeah.
Yeah. So they did describe it a bit more detail. A bit more gory detail, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, they could have actually described it, basically had him talking to him or whatever. But then again, they couldn't, because if he'd actually if they described what had happened, then they would have probably had to describe the scene, and that means he's just come in and seen him doing that, and they wouldn't have seen himself or stuff like that. I don't know how you would have done it, because they would have had to try and justify why Lister wasn't in it.
There was a Red Dwarf magazine, Smegazine rather, in the early 90s that did a comic strip version of Future Echoes, but like it was a bit kind of basically Rimmer does see it. Like he actually sees like Lister, what are you doing? And then when he blows up, it's like, oh God, Rimmer, Lister, messy to the very end, aren't you?
Yeah, but I suppose, yeah. See, I would like to have seen that. I must admit, I think it would actually work better in comic book form drawn. Just for the simple fact is you can have it as messy as you want and still have it funny with the wobbles of things flying all over the place.
Yeah.
But I think they did well with the TV show to actually encompass everything that was mentioned in the book. in the TV show as well.
But there's also a bit of foreshadowing as well, because when we see the older Lister, the 187-year-old Lister, we see a certain tattoo on his hand, and that's a foreshadowing for later, isn't it? Because it's
It is. Yes, it is. That's right, because they talk about his hand was it had the
burn marks.
Yes, it had the burn marks, the BTL.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'd see the first time I read that, never noticed it.
Mm-hmm.
I only noticed it this time. So obviously when I'm driving, I'm starting and stopping. There's times I've missed bits and pieces. But I think this time, because I was sitting listening to it properly, I picked that bit up, whereas I definitely missed it the last time.
Mm-hmm.
So I did. Which is, it's, considering I was expecting a bit more. I was expecting to not miss anything, which is obviously a bit silly.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't pick it up that time, but I did pick it up this time, and it did surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
So it did, which was a good, I suppose, in a good way. So can't complain.
So next bit's the Crichton bit, isn't it?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And see, the thing is, when I was, I don't know if I actually preferred the TV version of it. It's just one of those things. They give a lot more backstory, obviously, about it, about the crash and why it crashed. In effect, Crichton in the TV show, he was a bit psychotic because he had been looking after the 3 dead bodies for such a long time.
Yeah.
But in the show, he's the one that kills them all.
In the book,
in the book, he's the one that kills them all by cleaning the computer with fairy liquid completely, to the point where basically it can't fly and everything's down. And they're even to the fact as they're saying, is so and so working? I say, yeah, I don't think Crichton's actually cleaned that yet. So even they know Crichton's the one that killed them all.
Yeah. The thing, right, in the episode of Roborus in series 7, there's a bit where Crichton says, I'm going to end up on my own again, just like I did on the Nova 5. And like Lister says, you killed the crew, Crichton. Now, they never explained how in the TV show, because that was kind of a different, that was kind of lifted from the novels.
Yes, I think so.
In the novel, they actually explain how he does it.
How he does it, yeah, because in the TV show, you only meet Crichton still looking after the 3 skeletons, because he explains that there was a crash and only the 3 survived, the 3 women survived, and he's looking after them, but it doesn't explain anything else. It doesn't explain how it crashed, whatever. It's just a case of there was a crash, he's been looking after the 3 of them, they're injured, and in the book they explain that he cleaned the computer so thoroughly that it broke it, because he cleaned it completely with soapy water.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he's a sanitation mechanoid. Surely he knows things like you don't get water into certain things. But obviously he's broken down to that point where it made 0 difference.
Well, in a way, I think it's almost saying that there's certain things he's programmed to do, which means it prevents him from... Well, yeah, basically it's like the way he's programmed doesn't allow him to exercise common sense.
Yes.
Which is kind of, in a way, tragic. And then, it's like...
I think that's actually is probably a better explanation than the one I had, I must admit.
Yeah.
It's only for the simple fact as I was thinking about it, was just a case of I was thinking about it, and I'm sitting there thinking, considering obviously we've got notes or supposed thoughts on Crichton from the TV show, we don't think about it other than that. But when we get introduced and it gives a bit more detail, you're sitting there thinking, well, he's already talked about how he's not rainproof. There are certain things not waterproof when he's talking about things. And you can't actually do that because the things are not waterproof. Yet, there you go. He's actually used soapy water to clean a computer system inside and out. And that's what I was saying about it. It's just a case of you can't actually think about the TV show when you're reading it. It enhances the TV show, but you can't think this TV show said this because they are, as you said, two separate entities. Which, as you go on, and it's things like the Crichton one, it shows it's a separate entity because all the things like with the cats and stuff like that, they're just things that are never mentioned. But seeing them is a lot better. But with Crichton, because these are things that are never mentioned, but later on, when things that you've seen in the TV show, it makes less sense. Or maybe it makes more sense because if he's actually realised he's done something like that, then that's why he's a wee bit overprotective if he mentions things that water could damage that and cause it to crash and stuff.
Do you think maybe that's kind of, in a way, maybe that was meant to be his arc here? Because later on, he does face a dilemma where he has to save the Red Dwarf crew from their predicament of being slowly dying away. And it's almost like it's the Nova 5 situation, but he has to kind of, this time he's got to prevent it.
Well, yeah. And I think it also has to be set because he has got a personality, even though if it's a faulty one, because if he didn't have a personality, because you don't have the time frame of him breaking his program because Lister teaches him, encourages him over the time, whereas you're introduced to him quite quickly, then you're into Better Than Life, and so you don't have the expectations of breaking the program, whereas this is already established that he's sort of broken his program with his androids obsession and other bits and pieces.
Well, the thing is, when it does feel like in this they've tried to kind of get around that by having the bonding between Lister and Crichton come from the fact that Crichton has dismantled himself because he's realized that he's got no function anymore now that the crew are dead. His crew are dead. And so Lister is the one who kind of takes the time to have to reassemble Crichton. It's because he's kind of, firstly, because he wants to find out about how the Nova 5 ship works. And secondly, because he does feel sorry for the guy and he wants to kind of give him another chance at life. He just couldn't help it. Like he was following his heart there. And
I think so. I'm trying to think of the way compared to their bonding on the TV show. I think was better. The rebuilding obviously was mentioned off screen in the TV show. The fact is he built, and it's actually a bit more detail, and you can understand the mistakes and the bits and pieces. But I think the bonding aspect of it, I think it's more Lister bonding with him rather than him bonding with Lister. Based on the fact is he's had to learn everything about the androids to rebuild it. Whereas I don't think it gives the same bonding with Crichton to Lister because he's just built him. It's not as if he was aware of being built and stuff like that. Whereas in the TV show, there's a bigger bond about how he's teaching him, and that's how the bond builds up. So I think the bond in the book is sort of reversed than in the TV show. Which I think works better in the TV show because of the Better Than Life things later on.
I think at the time this was written, they were kind of probably still on the TV show. They were juggling whether to bring Crichton back as a regular. So it was still kind of, because they weren't sure whether Crichton was going to be a one-off or whether they were going to bring him back. And I think in this, they made him a kind of a mainstay.
See, I thought they had actually brought him back before this had come out, and they're just expanding on it. But
see, this came out in 1989. Now, there's a few bits from Series 3 in this, and that basically we've already got the bazookoids in the book, which they never. This is the first appearance. I think this might have been the first time they actually invoked the bazookoids, but the design of the ship stayed the same as it was in Series 1.
Yeah,
design of the bunks, design of the drive room, and so I think there's none of the plots of Series 3 are invoked in this. It's all it's all from Series 1 and 2.
Yeah, I remember it being mostly Series 1 and 2, and obviously it was the Crichton episode.
Yeah.
But I never even thought about that aspect of it. Maybe it's just a case of hindsight. I thought that's what they were talking about.
I'm going to check, you know what? I'm actually going to check on Wikipedia because it might actually tell me the exact date this book came out and the exact. Let's see, Red Dwarf.
My dog's got the sneezes. He's had the sneezes every time since we took him down to the beach, and he's sitting in the background going like, don't know what it is. I think it's probably a bit of sand got up his nose and he's still trying to dislodge it. Been extremely funny listening to him for the last 2 days sneezing, but it can be really annoying when you're on a stream. But it
was published November 1989, so it was probably. I think they probably had started Series 3 by then.
I think they had.
Let's see. Let's see.
Because season 3.
It was concurrent. They were broadcast. They started broadcasting Red Dwarf 3 from the 14th of November onwards. So yeah, it was. So
it would have actually been written, and so it would have been. So it would have been written well in advance of that. So 14th of November 1989.
Yeah.
So it would have been written well in advance. So you're talking about. I think they probably had. Crichton was already in, but then again, the book would have actually, although it was published, it would have probably been written roughly about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the two of them have probably been written at the same time. So as they've written the scene, they've incorporated it into the book.
Mm-hmm.
So what they've done is incorporated stuff from season 1 and 2, and they've had the book, or else the book's been there and they've just been adding to it as they've been thinking things and taking things out of the book, putting it into the TV show. It could be either way, or they've just had a great idea and thought, well, we could use bits of that in the TV show, but it's such a good idea. What we need to do is actually keep it, and then they've actually decided to put it into a book. And it could be the same with the Crichton. It's something they had an idea for when they've decided, they've been given the okay ahead to go ahead with the Crichton. They've basically added bits to it because obviously, as you said, Crichton just appearing backwards. He was already in Crichton earlier, so they already knew the first part of it. So that history part of it could have been in it already. It's just the rebuilding and stuff like that, and the better than life later on. So it could be a two-way thing. That's the worst part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Aye, Wens just said, "Aye, poor pup, poor my ears." He sneezes. The thing is, the dogs sleep in the same bed, and when the two of them are sleeping and sneezing in the middle of the night, not fun. Right in my ear. So no poor pup at all. Benji's a pain in the ass. He's away sleeping now, so he'll be quiet. Unless he snores.
The book covers the pains of snoring as well, doesn't it? If you think about it.
Yes. Well, I'm saying nothing because accordingly that's how I snored. Snored, past tense. I don't do that now. But accordingly, that's what I used to do when I was a bit younger and a bit drunker and a bit heavier. I used to snore like that. Accordingly, people at the other side of the house could hear me. So I decided I'll not mention the snoring. But yes, my dog snores as well. He did that the last time I was on a stream. He was lying head. So he was. And I had to actually wake him up. good thing is I've got a box full of treats here. I just need to shout treat, and he actually shuts up and comes over. So he can snore quite loudly, but not as loudly as Lister, thankfully. That snoring scene was actually quite I mean, the fact that Rimmer's counting between the snores to see if it stopped. Oh my god, he stopped 4 seconds, nothing. And away he goes again. Yes, the snoring of Lister is fun, which we obviously skipped over because it's obviously forgot about it.
Yeah. So the next, but like the bit with they get the Nova 5 on the ship, and that leads to the other episode, doesn't it? Because they bring together the episodes in a way that,
yeah. Well, the final part of it, the Better Than Life.
Oh no! Before we get to that, it's Me Too, because they
they realise that also had the generation. But the thing is, as well, he went through everybody's tried to get somebody else. He didn't. He wasn't sneaky to try and get himself. Whereas, obviously, in the TV show, Lister thought he was getting Kachansky, and it turned out it wasn't. It was another Rimmer. Whereas this one, it was Rimmer trying to get it set up, and he was trying to find somebody else. So he went through all the ones from the Nova 5 first.
I think with Nova 5, he was hoping that we'd find someone and he could basically big himself up as something he's not.
Yeah, but
basically, because he didn't want to bring any of the old crew back, because the old crew knew his status and they didn't like him.
Yeah,
and he didn't like them. So it just made sense, and because it was his private discovery, like he alone discovered.
Yes, but it was the fact is that he actually in the TV show there was no such thing as. You find out that it was basically his plan all along was no matter what you do, you're picking this one. It's going to be me. Whereas in the book, it shows he was, although it was for selfish reasons, to find somebody that he could big himself up because he's now in charge of Red Dwarf and he's the captain in effect. He could say whatever he wanted, but it was the fact is he still tried other people first. It was only when they all failed that he thought, oh, me too. Which I thought was a nicer arc for Rimmer. Because it showed, yes, he was selfish, but he wasn't that selfish. He just thought about himself being the best person for the job. He tried to find somebody else first.
Well, the tragedy is he thinks, I can get on with myself. I'm the one, I'm not going to clash with anyone else but myself. But even then, it all falls apart.
Yeah.
And you see more of this come about because obviously they've got to, because in this version, we actually see a lot more of what they do as a team.
Yes.
As a pair of duo, because they've got the whole thing of fixing the
Nova 5. Because it's in 2 parts and you have to, but yes, it's a case of, but see, I've always had an issue, I suppose, even with the TV show and the Me Squared. Yes, if you're petty, you'll be petty no matter what, who to, even with yourself. I can understand that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But it seemed to be the second Rimmer seemed to be more petty or more sneaky. Do you know what I mean? Like in the TV show, he was the one that was slagging them, going kiss back, and all that, and bringing all the things up they didn't want to be brought up. So you get sympathy for the original Rimmer. In the book, he's the one who's sneaking away for the sleep, and then slagging the other one, saying he's sleeping. So it's always the original one seems to be the one that's getting the bullied more, which I found weird, because wouldn't they just bully each other the same idea? But it always seems to be the original one that gets bullied more.
Well, they do
that aspect of it.
Well, the book does try to explain it a bit more, because the duplicate Rimmer is the one who says, we're not the same, because I was revived after the accident. You you revived first, and you spent time with Lister, and Lister made you soft. And that's, you know, because
I suppose so.
Because he does actually say that. You even tried to apologize to me, and like, remember what Dad said? Never apologize, never explain. And it's like, also, I think to a degree they're also kind of, because they're always kind of trying to outdo each other in terms of the whole.
Yes, I can understand that aspect of it. I just never understood why one in the TV show and the book, it always seemed to be the original one was always getting bullied. It makes a lot more sense because I'd completely forgot about that part about the fact as he's explaining you're softer because they're different because you've spent time. I always assumed it was just a backup of just before. So he's got the disc, but it's a backup disc of him because in the show it's almost like it's a copy of when he got revived. He's taken a backup copy and got it done.
Yeah.
And obviously in the book, it's the original one prior to him being revived. So it's the old copy, as you said, and he's softer because he's lived with Lister.
Well, I mean, the book kind of goes into what Rimmer's like, and it's like there's two kind of aspects in conflict there. There's the fact that there's one that does acquiesce all the time, but there's also the part that's the harsh inner critic, and it's like to Rimmer, the original Rimmer, it's like the inner critical, the acquiescing side always wins out, whereas to the duplicate, the inner critic wins out. So he's always being hard on his other self, and I think because he's being hard on his other self, and the other self keeps kind of acquiescing, that's when
he smelled blood in the water.
Well, yeah, he becomes the dominant in the relationship, shall we say?
Yeah. See, in the TV show, I always found it weird because obviously it didn't go into a lot more detail. They're just doing me. I just assumed it was a copy of that time. He's taken a copy, then recreated it. But in the book, I suppose I had missed that part out about how you're softer. And yes, as you said, he's got two sides to his story, his personality, and because the copy has actually, or the second drummer has said that you're softer.
Yeah.
So he's now the bully, the dominant one. And because he's been bullied once and he's submitted once, then he's now the acquisition one, and he's constantly getting bullied by himself.
Yeah.
So as soon as you apologize once, a bully will just keep getting in. It's the same as we see nowadays, whereas you never apologize because it's blood in the water. And I suppose he's the original SJW.
Well, I mean, in a way, you could see maybe it started with a kind of a noble idea of I've got to be hard on myself to make myself better.
Yes. And
and also the difference is in this version, it's a longer time period, and we actually see the way that, because in the
they react to each other, but rather than just the arguments which you saw in the TV show.
In the TV show, we only actually see them living together for a few days. Like there's a bit where they have the let's have the ridiculous wake up early kind of thing.
Yes.
In this it happens so often, you get the sense, okay, that they're going to wake up. That if that's the kind of the times they keep pushing each other to wake up, then they're going to get less sleep. They're going to get tempers are going to be a lot more strained, and that was kind of, I think that's what happened in the end. It was just it exploded. Yes. It was more kind of,
and I think it's because as you said, it dragged it out more so you could see the decline gradually. It wasn't a case of it just was a couple of days and they've just gotten each other's goats and one's bullying the other. It's a case of it was a gradual thing, and the two of them are actually being snide about each other.
Yeah,
but you obviously only hear it from the original's perspective. But you can imagine both of them doing it.
Well, Rim actually kind of ponders this: is why can't I get on even with myself? What is it? And he keeps thinking, you know what? It's because I've got this self-image that seeing my real self doesn't live up to. And it's like listening to yourself on an answering machine message and realizing that you don't sound as coherent as you thought.
Yeah, tell me about it. I've watched myself back on YouTube. What did he just say? He's mumbling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know you do. You definitely, you never sound the way in your head you hear yourself. You look at all these people who think they can sing, and somebody will show, let them listen to something, and they'll say, "Oh, that's terrible. Who's that?" That was you. No. I sing a lot better than that. You know what I mean? If you tell someone, I recorded you last night, listen, they'll say, "Oh, that was really good. I sounded really good in that." Whereas you say you could talk about something and you say, "Oh, have you heard so and so? He's not very good," and you put it on and you hear it and they go, "Oh, that's terrible. Who's that?" And then you say, "Oh, that was you." Then, "Oh, no, that's not me. I definitely can sing." I've met people like that. Whereas if you tell them you're going to listen to you, they'll hear themselves in a particular way because they're expecting it. Whereas you tell them there's a listen to this and tell us what you think. "Oh, that's terrible. That's bad." Well, that's you. That's how you actually sound. And because you didn't have any preconceptions, you're being critical of yourself because you realise you can't sing. But in your own head, we're all the same. You know what I mean? I know fine well I'm as handsome as I look. No matter what people tell me, I'm sticking to that fact. Right. But it is that. We've all got an image of ourselves. We all think we're a bit more clever than we are. We all think we're a bit more handsome than we are. Well, obviously, being Scottish, I'm obviously as handsome as I am and I'm as clever as I am.
I do think this is quite a cathartic read of a book in a way, because it kind of it just delves into people's.
It makes you think, and it makes you think. Even silly things like you're watching the downward spiral of Lister early on, and you're sitting there thinking, there's been times in your life you can imagine that happening. It's just somebody's pulled you out of it. I mean, I remember that when my mum and my two sisters passed away within 4 years of each other, with the three of them. And I was in a downward spiral because I was not like me. And all I heard in my head, I remember buying a load of drink and thinking, feck it. And in my head, I heard my mum going, "Don't you dare."
Yes.
So I basically got rid of it all and thought, no, I can't do that, because yes, I was in a bad place, but in my head, I heard my mother saying, "Don't you dare." And that was enough to get me going. But it's a case of you realise that with the Lister going down that dark path, if there's nobody there, even the Lister, which was brought back to Hilton back, you can understand something like that. You just need somebody. It doesn't matter how good, bad, or indifferent they are.
Just like Wendology.
That's not true, Wendology. That's not true at all.
Yeah, I think your streams with PJs are better than mine. I
just listen. I like listen to everybody. It's basically, it makes me sound a lot better. That's what it is. That's why I have the intelligent people on my stream. Makes me sound better.
Yeah.
Because you basically what you do is I bring the intelligence level down and all my guests down, so it levels it out. That's the way I look at it. Even though I know I'm intelligent. My mommy told me.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in this portion, you actually see the amplified arrogance of Rimmer, because when the crew are away doing because basically Lister, Rimmer, Lister, Cat, and Crichton have to go and find the material.
They're mining. They're mining for the material for the hop drive, or not hop drive. It's
duality jump.
Duality jump. That's what it is.
The duality drive. Yeah. So they have to do the mining to get that, and Rimmer and kind of the Rimmers are basically repairing the ship. But the thing is, they keep on pushing the Scudders to kind of put the ship back together, and they crack it a third time. And by the time Lister and the others get back, there's about 200 dead Scutters have been crushed by the ship or worked to the point of exploding. And it's funny, but it's also kind of sad because you're thinking, well, now they're down to the last Scutters.
Yeah,
because
it is a case of, even when they were getting the engines, basically the Scutters were cleaning things as they were trying to get the engines running, and they crushes something like 20 of them in when the piston goes down, because he's ticking the box, but he's not checking. He's just going tick, press button. Yeah. Suddenly there's 20 Scutters actually all crushed because he put them all in there to clean it a lot quicker. And then suddenly he's down buy 20 scutters, and he's literally struggling because he's so pushing himself so hard that he's not paying attention, and he's making it worse for himself rather than just doing the job. He's trying to push himself so much that he's falling behind, which
it's like it's like Rimmer's nature is just to prove himself outlandishly rather than actually just to relax into the job. And I think that's why he's in a sad way, that's why he keeps failing.
Yeah.
But because the more he fails, the more he feels has to prove himself.
Yeah. And yet in the TV show, there's times where he's not tried and he's succeeded.
Yeah.
And that, I suppose, is similar to that. Is because he's trying too hard, he constantly fails. But when he doesn't try something, it just seems to come natural. Like, for instance, the Ace Rimmer. Even though he kept failing in when he smoked me a skipper, he still managed to do the bits and pieces, and he obviously managed to go out and be, because he thought, well, man, I'm not going to lose anything, so he was going out and doing it. So it's almost when he wasn't trying, he was succeeding, but when he tried, he caused that much problems that it was. But and no, when you definitely don't sound like a nutter, believe me. I'm Scottish, I know what nutters sound like. So, no. I must admit, seeing the two of them arguing in the book, or listening to the two of them, or we'll just say I read the book, even though I got somebody to read it to me. Reading in the arguments in the downward spiral of Rimmer was better in the book because, as you said, there was the time frame and you could understand it a lot more rather than him, oh, he's just that arrogant or that cringy or that pathetic that he could bully himself and not even realise it. Whereas in that, as you said, it takes its time. And the two of them are just trying to get things done to prove how great they are to everybody else, that they fail, everybody else and themselves.
Yeah.
And when they do finally get it completed, it's at the expense of everything else.
Yes. And it kind of goes a bit more into the psychology of how Rimmer kind of wages a kind of a verbal war, and it's just I think this kind of becomes recurring in it. It's like he has this idea, I'm going to get in with this, and then, but he does it too late.
Yeah,
because there is the kind of bit where he says, I've been insulted so long, often I'm going to use the total annihilation device, the nuke to end all nukes, and he's about to say, gazpacho soup, and then the
other one says it dead just before him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and it brings it back full circle to one of these are getting wiped. So we can get the expression, find out the expression.
Well, in the TV episode, it was because Lister was saying, look, if you're not getting on, one of you's got to go, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in this, it's different. It's like in this, it's only if we're going to go back to Earth, the Nova 5 can only support one hologram.
You can only support one, so one of you has to go. And yes, but it basically still brings it back, so they use it as an excuse to. Well, I don't suppose he gets it to the gazpacho soup because it's not as big a deal in this, whereas the TV, they made it a big deal about super. I won't mention it.
Yeah.
I mean, that type of thing. Whereas, yes, it was just brought up and it didn't make as big a deal of it. And I thought that was actually better done because it was just a wee throwaway thing, just as he was just lamenting how bad he's had it.
Well, it fits in this because it's like when Rimmer gives the backstory of how he was at the officers' table, and I think it was like it was a hint. It was full circle from the fact that we'd seen him try to kind of work himself up the rank, and this was kind of a big part of that. This was this was almost the culmination of that point where he was so close to being with the big ones, and he got that one mistake made, and that was
Yeah.
And there's even more backstory with the fact that he kind of has that escort who basically ripped him off, and he like he goes to the he can't get a date. So he says, "Well, I had a date, but she got run over earlier today, but I'm over it now." I was like,
Yeah. But it's the fact is the explanation was a lot better, but it was the fact that the way they got to it, they didn't make the gazpacho soup such a big deal. And they just got the story, and it was almost a case of the two of them were talking because they were talking. Why are you that bad about it, and why are you that annoyed, or why are you that petty? It was almost a case of the two of them were just talking, and he explained it because he asked them about it, and he thought, well, I've not got anything to lose, and that's going to turn out I've already deleted the other one. So I think it was a bit better in that respect because it didn't make it a big thing with the soup.
Oh, hello, Mr. Hyde. Geek Inside.
Hi, afternoon. Try night. I know it's afternoon for you, but it's night out here.
Yeah, it's 12 minutes past 10 in the evening, in the night for me. Yeah.
Yes, but no, I liked the story, and it was because I didn't feel as if the gazpacho soup, because obviously it was on the video in the TV show. It was a case of it was the last word they said. It was on the video, and they wanted to find out about it. Whereas it
was like the Rosebud thing.
It's like the Rosebud. He wanted to find out what that meant and why he said it. So he twisted it round. Whereas in this one, he didn't say gazpacho soup as he thought it. There wasn't a recording of it, so there was nothing in it. It was only just when the two of them were gazpacho soup, and he could hear it, and he was just curious about it. So he asked them, and they thought, well, I've nothing to lose because I'm getting switched off. So he explained it. So it wasn't as devious by Lister to get the information. It was just a case of he was asking them, and he got told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I think.
Only 5:15 over there. So you're a wee bit behind, but we'll let you off it.
Speaking of over in that time zone, the next bit's when they get to Earth, isn't it?
Yes.
And where does Lister go?
He ends up in
Bedford Falls.
Bedford Falls. I've got it sitting there. So it's one of my favourite Christmas movies of all time.
Yeah.
James Stewart is George. So it is. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of my Christmas favourites. I introduced my wife to that 3 years ago. It's the first time she'd ever seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And now we watch it every Christmas because she enjoys it, because I've always loved it. But yes, I keep on Bedford Falls. It's just the idea of it. And I always found it a wee bit silly that he didn't realise he was in Better Life until he was getting that, and he scratched on his arm outside. I thought it was a wee bit silly. That's all. Just,
well, I mean,
he knew it was always Christmas, so he knew something was up. But
the point is that basically it happens by increment, doesn't it? It's like you get to Earth, you discover this place where it's like the echo chamber effect. It's like when you're told enough, you accept the reality with which you're presented, and if it's, I think in a way I get the feeling that the device knows how far-fetched it needs to be before you'll start to question it.
Yes.
So it knows that basically if it takes into this, okay, he's gone to Bedford Falls, and it's this, he just thinks, oh, it's a recreation by the fans. And then basically, because he thinks, well, this isn't the real Bedford Falls, is it? But it's like there's so many kind of people who are like the characters in the films. He thinks, oh, this must be where all the fans of the film congregate, and I'm a fan of the film, so we're all kind of going to get on. And the more he ingratiates himself in that community, the more he understands the rules of the community. And the rules of the community, I guess, are it's always Christmas Eve here.
Yeah.
And So I think gradually, bit by bit, it's just that becomes the new normal,
and he accepts it after that. Whereas I never thought about it that way. I just thought he seems to have accepted it quite readily, and even the fact that Kachansky's the number he used was just too small, considering it was meant to be 3 million years. But a Kachansky's descendant looked exactly like her, and nothing really changed in the 3 million years.
Well, do you think maybe that was a hint that he'd never quite come to terms with her death? Possibly.
See, I thought initially yes, but it was just wee bits and pieces in that. I thought he must have known, because he's meant to be 3 million years. Holly told him that normally the lifespan of a species is hundreds of thousands of years. Not even the dinosaurs didn't last 1 million years. Specific dinosaurs, the reign of the dinosaurs did, but
Lister wouldn't.
Specific ones.
But Lister wouldn't want to believe that, would he? He'd want to believe.
He wouldn't want to believe it, but that's what I'm saying. But he must have known. That's what I'm saying. He didn't want to believe it, but because coming back and things are so similar, he had to have known it, and that's why he seemed to accept it very quickly, because he realised that. Yeah.
Well, not quite, because the first thing he's presented with is all the fame and adulation, which is Rimmer's fantasy and it's Kat's fantasy. It's not his fantasy, but he sees it, and it's like that's probably for him. It's like, well, no, this isn't perfect. This isn't too perfect. This is the very thing I'm going to Bedford Falls to get away from.
Yeah.
So, and that's when he's like, look, I just want to. This is what I want to kind of. He has to carve that life, and I think because he carves that life, he assumes it's a real life. It's like it's like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. See that.
I know we probably disagree, don't we?
We probably do, but it's. I think the reason I was saying that is because once he started getting the pain and he started joining the dots of the pain, as it were, that he realised very quickly. There was no hesitation as soon as he realised what it spelt. So that's why I was thinking he must have known, but he chose to ignore. But he couldn't ignore it once the pain started. Well, and obviously, for people who haven't read it, the book has him in Better Than Life, and the only reason he realises it is he starts getting pains in his arm, sharp pains. So he buys cream and he puts the cream on, and as he's putting the cream on, where the pain is, it's spelling BTL equals.
No, U equals BTL, which is
U equals BTL. So you are in Better Than Life. So, but the fact is, he recognised that as soon as he joined it up and read that, he immediately thought, I'm in Better Than Life. That's why I think he knew, but he chose to ignore it, and now he couldn't ignore it because there was no way he could pretend any otherwise. That's why I think he knew and he chose to ignore it.
Well, I mean, in some ways, the dots kind of connect from reality. Like they were on course to get to Earth, which was a kind of fantasy fulfilled, and that was before they went to the game. So, and the other one is, of course, the other bit is he knew he was going to give birth to Jim and Bexley. Well, no, he knew he was going to father Jim and Bexley, rather. He doesn't give birth to them. So when he gets to Earth, and he actually, Chrissy kind of, he has that relationship with Chrissy and he has the family. He assumes, well, that was foretold in the future echoes. So
yes,
this is real. He thinks this is reality.
See, I can understand that aspect. It's just the fact that he accepted it very quickly. Yeah. That he was in Better Than Life. So as soon as he saw the way it spelt, it was almost a case of, I couldn't actually deny it anymore.
Well, see, I think it was because there was no other explanation for his pain. Because the doctor said there was nothing wrong with it. So he thought, when that was spelled out, it was like, no, someone outside, someone is trying to tell me something. And it's no one here. So that is a kind of, it was an improbable event he couldn't explain, because basically it was, the game didn't control that pain. And so that was an improbable event within the game that he just couldn't explain. So it was like, and that caused everything else to unravel because it was like it's like the final paradox kind of thing.
Yeah, I understand that. But that's what I'm saying. It's, to me, the book, it was just a case of he accepted it too quickly.
Yeah.
You look at how the cat and Rimmer accepted it. Theirs was more of a struggle. I don't believe in they had to be convinced, whereas he seemed to convince himself very quickly. That's the way I read into it, and it was just because, and that made me think he knew, but he didn't want it to be real. He wanted this to be the way it was. He was quite happy if he realised, well, if I die in here, I die. Sorry, that's the end of story. So,
well, actually, the sequel kind of goes a bit more into that, doesn't it?
Yes. I started listening to that, but I had to stop because I'm only 2 or 3 chapters into it because I realised that we were going to do, because I was literally just going to do all 4 books. And then I realised, well, we're going to do one a month, one a week. I better not do that and just have to go re-listen to them anyway. So I thought I stopped and I went back and listened to this again. So yes, it does go into it in a lot more detail. And I'm trying to remember where the detail stopped in this one and it continues in the next one.
Right.
That was the problem because obviously I went on to the second book straight away.
Right. Okay.
So I myself up.
Okay, in the first book, Rimmer is still married to that mad prima donna woman, isn't she?
Yes.
Juanita.
The Juanita, she's still having the affair with everybody except him.
Yeah, well, they haven't. Well, the divorce hasn't happened yet, so
the divorce, right? So, yes. Well, I've gone away by that, so I've obviously so I need to watch where we get to before so we don't go too much into the next book.
But can I give you a bit of a spoiler here?
Yes.
For the next book, I mean. Right. In the next book, it's only like it's about 3 pages in that it all starts really falling apart. Whereas basically.
See, that's where Crichton. It starts with it's the Crichton part.
No.
Or is that the bit with the toilet over the head part?
Toilet over the head part. Yeah.
Yes.
But that's in the sequel.
Yes, that's in the sequel. Because it ends with the Juggernaut crashing into the village. Is that how this book ended?
No. The Juggernaut doesn't. We don't get the Juggernaut until early into Better Than Life.
Right. So basically, it's. I'm just trying to remember how this one ended. That's why I'm trying to.
Right. Basically, they find out that it was actually Crichton who was burning the wording into Lister's hand. Lister goes to Rimmer. Rimmer is not easily convinced, and so because he's saying, look, what do you want? Do you want shall I give you a check for £5? And he goes, you're a smeghead, Rimmer. And then he says, look, I want to go to Earth. It's like, come again? We're on Earth. It's like, no, we're not.
Aye, and then they go and they meet the cat as well, and they convince the cat, and then it all falls through. That's where it ended.
Well, the thing is, Rimmer is still kind of clinging to the belief until they actually see the cat's mansion, and it's like, wait a minute, he's got like a whole moat made of milk. He's got these Valkyrie warriors with huge, memories kind of thing.
Yes.
Like the big shock, the bit that you would not get away with today was when they have to get the cable car and the mirrors are arranged just to look at the Valkyrie's cleavage. It's like, bloody hell. I love that line with Lister saying, who did he get this place from? Benny Hill.
Yeah, but there's also the aspect of it is in the book.
Yeah.
There's adult aspects of it. There's the sex the cat has with
anyone he wants,
and even with anyone he wants, how he wants, and also he even has it in timetabled.
Yeah,
so he does. And there's also the puppy Olo.
Oh yeah, the dog killing.
Yes,
the cat's like
and the hunting of the animals and stuff like that. But yeah, so you can't imagine them being in anything now. But they're quite prominent in the cat's fantasies.
Yeah. Yeah. When Dolly says I can't
Just
picture
can't
Rim and
picture
married.
it. Well, basically, imagine them are married, and that's exactly how it is. That bad.
Yeah, because it's like it's because Rimmer becomes really famous on Earth, and he kind of almost becomes he becomes the next Trump in a way, doesn't he?
He's a bit of everything. He'll employ someone who was his high school teacher who bullied him just to do menial stuff so he could bully him around. He'll employ his dad as his chauffeur, so his dad has to see how important he is. He'll employ.
He basically designed this special time machine so he can go back in time, pick his dad up, and just to be a chauffeur, just to kind of so he can rub his success in his father's face.
Yeah.
And
he'll employ people with PhDs just to be his coffee boy and stuff like that, so he can fire them if they do anything wrong. So yes, and he's married to the most beautiful woman who hates him.
Well, she
basically just does not like anything and everything, especially him.
She's nuts, isn't she? She
is nuts. And the second part of the book explains other aspects of the TV show, like the personality tucks.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get into all that, but the second book is a good follow on from the first book. It ends in Better Than Life, where they're trying to get out. They realise they have to get out, but the title of the second book is called Better Than Life, so you can imagine.
Yeah, because the ending of this is where basically Crichton has kind of he's finally come into the game and said, "Look, I'm going to have to tell you how you get out," and he says you have to envision an exit, and you'll have to do it separately. So you only really follow Lister as he drives back to Bedford Falls.
Yeah.
He envisions the exit just outside his house where Krachansky lives, and it's like he's kind of and he's reflecting on his journey so far, because he's saying, "Well, look, I'm not on Earth. It's like I've not been on Earth since I was 24, since that birthday thing.
Yeah,
it's like I couldn't be any further from Earth."
And he's also getting to the fact that he's sitting there thinking, "Am I ever going to get back to Earth? Do I really want to give up this idyllic life?"
Yeah, because
he's being philosophical about it.
He kind of I think it's just as he gets sentimental about, because he feels like, even though he knows Krachansky and his family are fake, he feels like they're real, and he feels like he has an obligation to not abandon them.
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, just one more night. I can't abandon them tonight. It's Christmas Eve." And
it's always Christmas Eve. So
can I ask you this? When you were reading that bit, did you kind of almost have a certain Red Dwarf music in the back of your head?
I did dun 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 dun.
No. There was another one. When usually the scenes with when they're on the observation deck and Rimmer's looking out, and there's that kind of sad melancholy, the melody that dun 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 dun.
Funnily, no.
that was in my head. That was in my head. It was like it was kind of almost that sad kind of poignant ending of like, where do I go? And
see, I sort of heard it as the end, the dun dun dun, they just ready to get into the Red Dwarf, and just thought to say hi. Paul says, "We're at the point of nearly wrapping up, and thanks for joining us anyway." Hit that like button, hit subscribe.
So it basically ends on a cliffhanger.
It does, ends in a cliffhanger, but I thought it was quite poignant, because I was at the point, I was of the belief that he knew what it was, and he let himself to believe it, because it was easy to just let him believe it, and I knew he couldn't ignore it anymore once the pain had come in. So him going back and saying, "I couldn't, especially tonight, since it's Christmas Eve," knowing fine well it's always Christmas Eve. At that point, I thought, he knows what he's doing. he's resigned the fact that he doesn't care. He just
think-
wants to. That's how I felt, because I felt he knew and he deliberately ignored it until the point he couldn't deliberately ignore it. So because of the way I was reading it, I thought he knew where he was, but he deliberately ignored it until the point he couldn't deliberately ignore it. Remember, I'd said that? That's what I thought. He'd done that. But when he came back and says, I can't leave, and especially tonight because it's Christmas Eve, I thought, he's doing it again. He's deliberately given himself oh, well, I don't want this to end, even though I know it's fake. So he's giving himself the excuse to ignore it again, because he knows it's always Christmas Eve, and he knows that at that point. But he says, can't, because it's Christmas Eve. So he's letting himself go into that fantasy again and deliberately ignoring it. That's how I saw that part. So I thought it was quite poignant that he's let himself go into it again because he's in effect given up.
Do you think, the other thing is like I think it was once he realized they had to leave separately, because I think if they had to leave together, then I think together they would have done it. They would have
easily.
And it's like, but when they're separated, when they have to do it their own way, they all are individually kind of weak. They are weak to the game, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
even Creighton.
Yeah. Well, we don't necessarily find that out until the second book, but like
but the fact is, with Lister, that's why I thought it was poignant, and that's why at that point I thought that's when I was hearing the final music, because I thought it's almost a case of like any good episodic one, he knows what he's doing and he's just letting himself continue, so what's going to happen from then on, and so they end it. And that's what I'm saying. I heard the engine, because he knows what he's doing, because I thought he already knew where he was until he couldn't ignore it, because he did just ignore it. And then this proves it by him saying, I'm just going to ignore it again, because he knows it's always Christmas Eve. And he says, I can't leave him, especially when it's Christmas Eve, which is in effect every night is going to be the same issue.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. That's why I thought he was just letting himself get into that, and he knew what he was doing. But that was how I saw it. But I understand that's a good thing about a book, how you interpret the same thing, because we all interpret certain things differently. Because I interpreted it that he knew what he was doing, whereas you interpreted it slightly different. So because of that, at the end, we both interpreted it slightly different because of a assumption. And it's perfect, because that's why we could sit and talk about a book, because there's things that if we talk about it, there's certain things we miss, or certain things that mean something different, and as soon as you think about it, you go, oh, I never even thought of that, because that means that what you did earlier was changing it. That's why I love talking about books and TV shows and stuff like that, because how many times have we watched something and missed a wee bit, and somebody else says, you remember that when they did that? Oh God, that changes how the rest of it works.
Yeah.
And I think this book does that quite a lot. As you're reading it, there's something happens and you'll think, oh, wait a minute, that changes that thing that happened a chapter ago, because you missed it the first time, but when they mention it again, you think, oh, good.
Yeah.
But that's a perfect book. So what is your mark scale out of 10? What would you give this book for A, people who have watched Red Dwarf, and B, people who haven't? So there's two sets of marks here.
I'd give it a 9 out of 10, I'd say. I think if you've like, basically I would stress that if you've the TV series and the books are they're not the same. They're not the same canon. So basically, Red Dwarf is basically a different experience of what the TV series might have been. It's more of a might have been than a direct kind of. It's not kind of it's that kind of tie. And it's not a so. But yeah, I think if you're, I would say if you're a fan of the TV show and you kind of then yeah, I think it was worth investing the time in. I think it kind of shows. It definitely does feel like it definitely feels like you're seeing sides to Lister that are plausibly there, but you've never really seen in the TV show. It's kind of broader and deeper than the TV show could be, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So what do you think about for people who have not seen the TV show?
I think it's still a very good read. I do think perhaps the bit at the beginning with the where they're on the Mimas, the I think maybe if you look back at that now, it's a bit kind of I don't know, would I say dated?
Yes.
It's of its time in that it's a very, very seedy sci-fi setting, which was big at the time, but maybe looks a bit dated now. Maybe looks like it could do with a bit more nuance now.
It reminded me when I was reading it, I suppose not so much Blade Runner, but those type of things where they had the idea of the dystopian future and the flying cars, but they've just taken it a wee step to the side with the hopping cars rather than the flying cars. So I did see wee bits of that in it. For me, if you've seen Red Dwarf and you enjoy Red Dwarf, this is definitely a 9 out of 10 because it expands on the characters, gives them better backstories. It's not as you said. They're two different stories, two different canons. Yeah. Yes. However, you'll recognise enough within the book that you've seen in the TV show. Sometimes it's cut down, sometimes it's lighter, but this is a darker read. Still humorous. It's a dark humour. It's not a darker one as in nihilistic or anything like that. It's just got a darker undertone, but it's still humorous. It's not as if it's a completely different genre. This is still a comedy. It's but it's a darker comedy than a lighter, whereas the TV show is a lighter comedy with a few dark touches here and there. Whereas this one is darker undertones.
There are definitely bits that made me laugh out loud.
Oh, yes. That's typical Red Dwarf. There's so many bits that you're sitting listening to it and you're sitting there driving down the road and people looking at you because you got a big grin across your face.
Well, I mean, we're both Red Dwarf fans, so we've probably seen the jokes over and over again. So it's very difficult for something in the revisiting it for something to really make us laugh and think, oh, that was kind of, I didn't really get that before, but now I can
tell you one of the bits that every time makes me laugh in this.
And what's that?
Reading that part, it's really embarrassing. Don't worry, sir, we understand. And then he calls out the sheet. I couldn't help myself. I would burst out laughing because it was just so unexpected. Even on the second listen to it, I was not myself because it's just so really they went that way. And it is funny. That part there, that was one of the first ones where I thought it got me because it got me sitting there thinking, oh, really? That is so funny. It made me laugh out loud. And it's because it's typical humour. It's typical good Red Dwarf humour. Paul says, my son used to buy these books, so if there's a new one, I might add this to his birthday. There's four books. There's four books.
None of them are new.
None of them are new. None of them are new. They're all books. So you've got Infinity welcomes careful drivers. There's Better Than Life.
Yeah.
There's Backwards and there's The Last Human. That's the only four books that Red Dwarf have done. The most recent thing Red Dwarf has done is season 13, The Promised Land, and that's out in DVD. So no new books.
Yeah. By the way, I would probably say, thanks both for a really terrific review. If definitely want to check out these books, definitely check them out. I think.
Yes.
I would also say, I think maybe Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers is good, but I wouldn't necessarily say. I think you need to read the sequel as well because it's like I don't think
it's a part one.
Yeah, it's not a standalone necessarily.
No, it works as a standalone, but it definitely gives you this the craving for Better Than Life book. If you don't read Better Than Life, it's not going to make Infinity any less. But if you read Better Than Life, it increases it because it takes that story further. So yes, it is that. But for people who haven't watched Red Dwarf, so if you've never watched Red Dwarf and you're not entirely, I would say this is more a 7 or an 8, as in a really good story. However, I find it better if you know the characters coming into it. However, if you're planning to watch Red Dwarf, then it gets better because it gives you a good grounding to get into Red Dwarf to watch the characters. So if you're just looking at the books, I would say probably a 7. It's entertaining and it's a good story and it's funny. If you're looking at it with the prospect of watching the TV show, it makes it better because I would say it's an 8 because it gives you a good grounding for stepping forward and you'll recognise things from the book in the TV show, but you'll also recognise the differences in the way they go. So it makes the two of them better by reading the book first and going there. Whereas if you've no plans to watch the TV show, then it's a good story, but there's certain things that you can picture better once you've set that in and you're going on to the TV show because you see the characters. There are some interactions, slightly differences here and there, but there's enough that they've kept that make certain things in the book funnier in hindsight because you see the characters and how they're reacting to each other. Like, for instance, the traffic, the Rimmer and Lister in the taxi at the beginning. It's funny, but if you then go on to the TV show and watch them, then in hindsight, that's a lot funnier because you know the characters and you're bringing the characters back the way. So it makes it thingy. So if you've watched Red Dwarf, it's a good one because you're already familiar with the characters and you can picture all that, and it is a good read within that. However, if you've not watched it and not planning to watch it, it's a good book, but there's certain things you lose. Whereas if you're planning to watch Red Dwarf afterwards in the second read, it'll get better and better. That's the way I look at it. Is so it's good and great, and it's a case of how you look at it within the context of the TV show. I hope that makes sense.
It does, I think.
But so not too bad. Only 2 hours 40 minutes. But we did well. And thank you for joining us. And next week,
we find out what happens next.
Find out what happens. Better Than Life is definitely a good follow-up to this one. To me, the two books were written as one and split. That's how it feels. And I definitely think the two books work very well together. And if you wish to join us for Better Than Life, please do. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Widology, Darren, Paul says, The Geek Inside. And who else have we had? We've had Enigmatic Joker. We've had Captain Cockney Spock. We've had Fit to be Read. We've had Jim the Viking. And we've had, there was one other new...
Oh, Look Rocks.
Oh, Look Rocks. Yes, that's the one.
And Doctor Who quote that.
Yep. But thank you very much, ladies and gents, for joining us, and look forward to season 2. Remember, and give it a thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and thank you. And remember, Smegheads, I'm not old, I'm classic. Catch you next week. Catch you on the flip side, or as